All right, we doing something a little different today. It's still conversations with TinBridge, but we're not talking about somebody's life and what they had to overcome to get to where they are today. We've already done that with Chuck. He was my second guest on the show. I think Mia came after, right? No, Mia came before you. Then your episode came next, right? No,
You filmed me first.
And Mia saw it. Yeah, right. Okay, right.
No, I think you had filmed me.
I filmed you first.
Yeah.
Then filmed Mia, but released her episode first and yours second.
And then my second. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the first time that we've had a guest come back on since being on here before. And yeah, we about to get into it. This is maybe topics with TinBridge because we're gonna focus on a specific topic. And I hit my brother up a few weeks ago when I went to go see this movie called Sinners that's taken the country by storm. And I had my thoughts about it. And he could tell I was passionate via our text exchange. And I said, hey, man, I think you got to see this movie. I also sent him an interview that Ryan Coogler did where he was talking about what the movie meant to him, explaining certain themes and underlying messages in the movie. And I had him watch that first, and he watched it and he was like, okay, you got my interest now. We need to talk about this. So we went to go see the movie today. I saw it for the second time. Chuck saw it for the first time. So we fresh out the theater.
Literally fresh out the theater. Left the theater, came to the studio.
Right. Mm-hmm. So just from an artistic standpoint, Chuck, what are your thoughts about the movie?
From an artistic standpoint, there's some very interesting themes, right? Mm-hmm. Being blended together. You have and if I say something incorrect, I mean you're the film guy. This is you, bro.
I'm far removed though. I ain't did a film in I don't know how long, but I'll try. Right. Yeah.
I mean, but you understand. Mm-hmm. You understand film and movies and just the whole creative process. You understand it in a way that I don't.
Got you. I appreciate that.
You know what I mean?
That's the only thing I understand that you don't.
I'm gonna try to do the best I can. If I say a word or something that don't, if that's not the correct word, feel free to set me straight.
Got you.
But so in my mind, I'm thinking like, is it a period piece? Is that a fair?
Yeah, like 1930s Mississippi?
Yeah, 1930s. Right. So it's
Jim Crow era.
Yeah, Jim Crow era. Right at the start of the Great Depression. Right, you have the Delta, Mississippi, formerly Mississippi prior to the Civil War was a very, it's a rural state, but it's a very prosperous state when you think about the amount of millionaires per capita in the state of Mississippi.
Yeah.
They had more millionaires per capita in the state of Mississippi than they did in New York.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So Mississippi was a very prosperous place until the Civil War. And, maybe we'll even get into some conversations about the Civil War because, of course, race is a fixture in the film. Most people would think, well, 1930s in the American South, how could it not be? But, there are a lot of things about race and, race relations in the country, but in the South in particular during that time that, a lot of people don't really understand, right? And they take a lot, and they take their cues from Hollywood. And some of it is fact and some of it is fiction, but of course, to quote Alex Haley, a lot of it is fiction.
Ooh, in reference to Roots, right?
In reference to Roots.
Yeah.
And so a lot of myths that we have about or a lot of ideas and thoughts we have about race relations it's a lot of fiction. It's a lot of fiction. But you have a period piece. There's music, right? The blues and there are a lot of interesting, and of course people know, because I remember when I first saw the trailer, the first teaser trailer several months ago. I don't even remember what I was going to go see, and I saw the trailer, and I wasn't familiar. I don't even think I heard the name Ryan Coogler.
Oh wow!
I think the first time I really paid attention and heard the name is when you brought him up to me in reference to our friend Shadow Jackson.
Got you.
right? And then you were like, you and Chad, y'all like Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan. You know, y'all like a good parent. I think y'all really understand each other.
That was a compliment at the time.
Yeah.
Before we saw this movie. So, spoiler alert. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and there's gonna be some spoilers for those of you who haven't seen the film. We're gonna talk about what happened in the film. We can't give you a scene by scene synopsis, of course, but it's gonna be some spoilers, right? And so I didn't really know. I was like, oh, okay. Then I find out when Ryan Coogler, he and Michael B. Jordan kind of did all these films, and Ryan Coogler, did all these films, stuff like that, in the past. And so, when I first saw the trailer, I'm like, and you can tell. I don't know why it kind of gave me, was it Jordan Peele?
Jordan Peele.
It kind of gave me Jordan Peele
like
vibes.
The Get Out movie, right?
Yeah.
Where you kind of have this message within the movie, or a movie within a movie, or you got this underlying social commentary taking place underneath what's going on.
But even like with the trailers, like you don't really. You're like, okay, I don't really know what's going on, but I know something is happening. Like, what was Jordan Peele's last film about the black ranchers, and they had the horses, and it was like a UFO.
I think it was Up. I think it was called Up or something like that.
Okay,
I think it was. Or
and what Kiki Palmer?
Nope. There we go. Yeah, Nope.
Okay, I've never seen Nope.
Okay,
I've never seen even the film he came out. I think it may have been his previous film. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the one with the family and they had like the doppelgangers.
Man, what was that called? Us. I think it was
that
called
might have
Us.
been Us.
Yeah.
So Jordan Peele tries, he has these kind of like these more deeper, thought-provoking kind of films, maybe perhaps like reminds me of an M. Night Shyamalan, when Shyamalan was really like in his bag, as the youth like to say.
The Sixth Sense, I think he did the movie with Mel Gibson, Signs, maybe.
Signs.
Okay,
yeah. And so Unbreakable, probably my favorite M. Night Shyamalan film, right? And so I'm watching the trailer and I'm like, okay, Sinners. I can tell they never show you, right? Because spoiler alert, it's a vampire movie, right? or is it?
Right.
Right. Use the vampire trope to tell a deeper story.
Exactly.
But the first trailer that I saw, I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, what are they afraid of? What are they running from?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they were showing shots of Michael B. Jordan and some of the other performers, like they were terrified of something. And, you didn't really know what it was. You didn't really know what was going on. At least that's the thought I got. Because, and I wasn't, I'm not one of these people that's all like into like the Hollywood goings on. Because, a lot of these, plot synopses and little things like that, certain things leak out and the rumor mill starts spinning online. And people say, well, they say the next Ryan Coogler movie is actually a vampire movie, or is this or is that, So I wasn't privy to any of that information because I just wasn't looking for it.
Gotcha.
I didn't know what it was, and I didn't even know it was coming out, right? Because like I said, I wasn't checking for it, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh yeah, well this movie Sinners is coming out this upcoming weekend, and then the buzz, and like I said, the people started talking. I don't know what it's doing in the box office.
I think it did 46 million the first weekend, and it was like 60 million worldwide, right? So it probably made 15 million overseas, and then 45 in house. And the following weekend, it made like 40 something million. Okay. So it only there was only a 6% dip, which is unheard of. So it basically had two first week openings, and people are seeing it multiple times. That never happens. I think Jordan Peele movie Get Out, I think it dipped maybe 15%, and that was considered record breaking, right? So if a movie has a big weekend and it dips 60%, it's still on track to do good. So only 6% dip, which is crazy, bro. Okay.
Yeah. So it's doing good doing well at the box office, and these movies are pretty cheap to make, from my understanding. Particularly like films that are in the horror genre, horror films.
This one was about a $90 million budget. Okay, I think.
So that's pretty.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's even including like marketing or any of that stuff.
Right.
Supposedly I guess it was on social media that they had to hit the 200 million mark just to break even. And I think they gonna do that for sure.
Yeah. And so like you had these filmmakers like Coogler and like I said with Peele, You know, you just never. It's kind of like a subversion of expectations, as the saying goes, right? Then when the movie came out, and then next thing you know, right, the internet was on fire,
Going crazy.
You know, my internet ecosystem is, you know, I get a lot of, you know, conservative content. You know, me being, you know, politically conservative. You know, you got a lot of religious people or Christian, whose you know, content the algorithm feeds to me, and so I just saw a lot of people were upset. You know, it was like, oh, this is an anti-Christian movie. I was like, oh, okay, well, I didn't really plan on seeing it anyway. But, you know, a lot of people in my position would say, well, this is par for the course for Hollywood. And so, well, you know, what do you expect? And so it's
Exactly.
But then again, they say, well, there's another opportunity to highlight the fact that Hollywood, which is controlled by the left, you know, it hates us. It hates Christians. It hates conservative. It hates our values. And so, you know, a lot of people just took this as an opportunity. Oh, just gonna make more content, all right? And just talk about the latest fiasco from Hollywood. And I was just like, okay, man, whatever, right? And then you sent me this interview.
The one that we're gonna watch and actually react to. So you're gonna see us reacting to this video, this interview of this person who interviewed Ryan Coogler, and she basically is dissecting parts of this film, and you can tell based on his reaction that she's spot on. But I sent you this interview.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, you know, and initially I think you were just sending it to me just for my own personal use and enjoyment. Maybe you and I can have a private conversation about it over the phone. And then I could tell it kind of was mulling over on your, you know, in your mind a little bit. And you were like, man, hey man, listen, bro. He's like, no, I got a great idea. Like, man, this is right up your alley, bro. You know what I'm saying? And y'all gonna know what I'm talking about. If you have come across this interview online,
check it out,
like,
watch
man,
it. Yeah.
Yo, Chuck, we got to talk about this, man. And I was just like, all right. And then you said, man, I know you don't want to see the movie, man, but we got to do an interview. And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
So then I waited and I watched it, and then I was like, well, Dave, I said, man, I don't really need to watch the movie. I mean, maybe we could just do a reaction video to what Ryan Coogler has said in this interview. I mean, it's not like I know people, the first thing they'll say is, well, he didn't even see the movie. How's he going to? Yeah. And then I kind of was like, nah, man, I don't think I need to really watch the movie.
I told my wife what you said too. I said, hey, Bridget, he said he don't need to watch it. Bridget was like, call him back, tell him he need to watch it.
So you text me the next day. And actually, man, it's funny because I hadn't really given it any more thought after we had that conversation that night. You text me, and it didn't even take the moment I just read your text one time. The moment I read your text, I said, he's right. He's right, and that's why I text you back. I said, you're right. I said, let's do it. Let's do it. So I sat through a movie just to prepare for a podcast.
Field work. He did field work.
I did some field work just to prepare for an interview. You know, that, you know, hope, I don't know how many people are going to end up watching it, but it, you know, it was a good experience to watch it. And man, I'm interested. I'm looking forward to talking about it. But it was a lot of interesting themes. You know, a lot of people online, and I see, you know, people calling, you know, Ryan Coogler, like, you know, calling him a hack. You know, he's one of these, you know, hot shot guys in Hollywood now. And I you know, and you could probably jump in here and like help me understand, like, what is the difference between someone kind of paying homage out of respect and kind of taking something old and making it fresh and new, and someone who's just, you know, just being a hack, you know, just retread. Because, you know, of course, this movie is getting a lot of Dusk Till Dawn comparisons. I thought at times, particularly the climax, the end of the film, you know, someone like Tarantino is sort of known for, you know, gratuitous violence. You know, some people criticize Tarantino for that, because, you know, sometimes his violence borders on exploitation. Sometimes, in many people's opinions, is outright exploitation. Right, but I thought the climax, you know, especially when the last guy was murdered, you know, it kind of gave me those Tarantino vibes, And no, there are a lot of
You talking about the last guy, Delta Slim?
No, not Delta Slim. I'm sorry. Like I said, I warned you guys there were going to be spoilers. So
Yeah.
it is what it is. When the Grand with the Klan, the head.
Oh,
Klan
right, the
guy.
head Klansman. Yeah, because basically he sold that juke joint to them, and he was going to use it as a slaughterhouse. So by the time the morning came, they was going to come there and kill all the black people that basically had party to the wee hours of the morning. So right, okay,
Catch them when they were coming out and they're going to kill
Yeah.
them. And you know, he runs out of, you know, he empties his magazine, killing all the other guys. And you know, there's that climactic, dramatic moment at the end where this is Michael B. Jordan's character, or one of his characters. He plays two roles, and you know, he puts a new clip in, and you know, he shoots him with what I guess would be considered like a Tommy gun. That's what I'm thinking of, 1930s, you know, some type of rapid fire semi-automatic weapon. And you know, he puts about, I don't know, 20, 30 bullets in him.
yeah, man, yeah,
You know,
oh yeah,
you know, in close range.
Yep.
You know, and I was like, okay, this is giving me, you know, this is giving me Tarantino vibes. And so,
Even like Django, I think, you know, where it has those fulfilling scenes at the end that the audience can walk away from feeling full.
yeah,
Right,
And,
yeah.
you know, and I've heard people kind of criticize. I don't remember where I heard this, or else I would cite the person. But Tarantino, I've heard people describe him, or someone describe him, as almost like this this kind of guilt-ridden, guilt-riddled liberal, so to speak, who kind of wants to take certain things that happened in the past, right, and kind of give almost like an alternative history to sort of right the wrongs, so to speak,
To
of the
atone
past,
for the-
for
yeah,
the
yeah,
past.
yeah.
So he creates these very sensationalized, you know, over the top
Inglorious Bastards.
Inglorious
Yep,
Bastards.
that was
Perfect
another one.
example. You know, especially at the end when Hitler was killed at the end. I mean, it was like, dang, bro. It made you feel like, even this is Hitler. You made you feel like, dang, bro, y'all gotta do Hitler like that.
Yeah, right. Had you feeling sorry for him for a minute, like, dang. Yeah.
You know. So that's kind of like one of the knocks on Tarantino.
Like, this brother Hitler got a family, man.
Like, somebody liked him.
Somebody.
Hitler had some friends, didn't he?
Right.
Somebody liked him.
Somebody liked him. Yeah.
Ava Braun, she liked him, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what kind of like. So I you know, I don't know. I don't think that you know, Ryan Coogler is a film genius.
Yeah. But it would be probably unfair to say hack. I think. See, what I can respect about Quentin Tarantino is that, you know, you know what you're going to get when you go into his movies. He has a signature. He's been influenced by a lot of filmmakers. Yeah. He has a wide breadth of knowledge when it comes to just the history of film. But again, he makes the films his own. Well, Ryan Coogler, he made Fruitvale Station first. That was based on somebody's life. Right. Then he made the first Creed. That's based on the Rocky franchise.
Okay.
Then he made Black Panther 1, Black Panther 2. That's based on comic book stuff. So this was like his first movie that that he wrote solely without getting help from a co-writer. And it was his first original, you know, picture where, you know, he kind of created it out of thin air. So it's hard to say whether or not he's a hack yet. I guess we'll have to see what happens the next movie and the movie after that, because this is his first film, but it does have a lot of, like, you can see the influences and you don't necessarily have his signature to juxtapose it against, right?
What is his signature?
Yeah, what is it really? You know, he's a good filmmaker. He's a great filmmaker, especially when it comes to taking stuff that already exists, you know, like these stories of, you know, the guy from Fruitvale Station, Black Panther, so on and so forth. So it's hard for me to... I'll answer that maybe in another 3 or 4 films. Yeah.
You know, this is a real kind of down to earth, unscripted, personal conversation. I'm gonna tell you something funny. You know, because it reminded me of Fruitvale Station and seeing, you know, young Michael B. Jordan coming up. He was on The Wire and all that stuff, and he did Fruitvale Station, and that was the first time my then girlfriend at the time, she had went to go see Fruitvale Station, and I didn't go. It was her and a friend of hers, and she told me about the experience, and she said she was just bawling, just sobbing uncontrollably. You know what I'm saying? And you know, she was going through it in the theater. You know what I'm saying? I was my girlfriend at the time. And then her friend looked at her and was like, all right, man, it's a sad story, it's a tragic story. Why you going a little too, you know?
Did you know him? Did you know
too much?
Yeah, right.
Did you know this one?
Yeah.
And, you know what I'm saying? She was I'm like, y'all, this is not, I'm just telling you what I've heard. Nah, I'm not saying. All right. She was like, yeah. She's like, it reminds me of somebody. And she's like, you thinking of Charles, ain't you? No, but people have told me I look like Michael. I think I think he's a little older than me, maybe about a couple years. But people have told me I look like him.
So she could see you in the character.
So she saw me in the character.
And you was a bit rebellious at that time too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, of course, I mean, Michael B. Jordan, he done what the young people call it? They call it the glow up. Is that what they call it?
The glow up.
He done grown up a lot. Ladies or men, if you that way, whatever.
Don't try to pick me apart. I'm just telling you what they say.
I'm not telling you I am as handsome as Michael B. Jordan. I'm not saying that. To my wife, I might be. I love my wife to death. She probably think I'm the finest man alive.
Oh, she does. She does.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying I look like Michael B. Jordan, y'all. You know, maybe if I got some personal trainers or something, I geared up for a Creed role.
Yeah.
You know, right now, you see, I'm in the fitness middle class.
Oh.
But I don't look like Michael B. Jordan.
But you can get there though. It ain't like you far from that though.
But maybe from the neck up, we got some favor. We favor each other a little bit. I don't know. I don't really particularly see it. Maybe from time to time. But anyway. But I just thought that was a funny little side note. I've been told I look like Michael B. Jordan on more than one occasion.
Yeah.
I've been told I look like him. And then what's that dude, man? Chadwick so-and-so from Power.
From
Dude
Power,
Ghost in Power.
What's his name?
Is his name Chadwick something? That's
it's not Chadwick.
Is his last name Chadwick?
Amari Hardwick.
Amari
Hardwick. Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not saying women, y'all ladies, y'all love him too. I'm not saying I look
these
guys.
Yeah. You just saying what somebody else said. That's it.
Yeah. But we just having a little fun, y'all. Before we get deep. So like I say, laugh. I laugh with me. I'm laughing too, y'all. Don't you know what I mean? Because I'm me. I'm not trying to say I stack up. You know, I ain't no sex symbol.
Yeah.
Nothing like that. But you know, just funny little side note, man. Just having a little fun with the audience. But yeah.
You ready to get into this?
Yeah, man.
I'm gonna tell y'all my thoughts about the movie. I liked a lot of things about it, but I think I disliked more than what I liked about it. You know, and I'll get into that maybe after we react to this video that we're getting ready to see now. So let's start. And whenever you want to chime in and want me to pause it, Chuck, just raise your hand. I know this is going to happen a lot throughout this interview. Just raise your hand. I'm going to stop it and we're going to talk about it.
We'll see.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I want to kind of like add on to what you're saying, because one of my biggest takeaways.
Damn.
First 2 seconds, Chuck, like, hold on.
I got a problem with this. What Pam Grier? Why her shirt say Pam Grier? What is it about Pam Grier? You see, you don't understand Pam Grier. Foxy Brown. No, but let the audience know that we're starting about 5 minutes in.
Oh, right. So we're starting about this is the 6:04 mark of the interview. It's about a 20-minute interview total. But the first 5 minutes ain't really a whole lot going on. So we starting at the 6-minute mark because that's where we about to get into the meat and potatoes.
Because he talks in the beginning, Dave, he talks about like Dracula or vampires. He goes into Coogler a little, bit of the mythos behind just the cultural impact of the vampire character archetype in Western literature. He kind of talks about it, and he talks about Bram Stoker and all that stuff. I don't think he doesn't bring up Nosferatu, which I don't know if you saw the remake of Nosferatu.
I saw it. Me and Bridget saw it not long ago, actually. Yeah, that came out about a month ago or so, a couple months ago. Yeah, we saw it at the movies.
Months ago. Okay. Yeah. And there are a lot of
Vampire in Brooklyn.
The greatest vampire.
One of the greatest movies of all time, man. Y'all got to check that out if y'all. It's a cult classic, man. But anyway, yeah.
The greatest vampire movie ever made. What y'all talking about? But no, seriously. But yeah, that's what he talks about. And me, I if you know something, you can educate me. I don't know like a whole ton. Just about that. I think even Ryan in the interview talks about like Vlad the Impaler and some other things about how there was this growing how just the vampire myth kind of evolved over time,
Absolutely.
throughout fiction. So you can kind of tell that, to his credit, Ryan Coogler is somewhat of a student of art and literature,
Literature, culture, history, all of that stuff. Yeah,
right. So I kind of appreciate that. So me, like I said, me personally, just full disclosure, I don't know a ton about the vampire ethos and mythos, but because I hear a lot of people saying a lot of different things about the vampire and the significance of the wanting of blood, the drinking of blood, where the sun, the metaphor of them not being able to go out in the sun and these kinds of things, and you have these constant tropes. But people take license, they take creative license with the vampire archetype, and it's kind of interesting to see it kind of go off in the different directions. But it's interesting because you watch the film. There's clearly this kind of pro-black message in the film, right? But here you are, you're talking about, I guess, a creature or some kind of being or entity, I guess, that is synonymous with again, like European folklore and myth, right?
Yeah.
Somebody out there would say that, of course, they copied it from Africa somewhere. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Right? The Dracula archetype came from Africa somewhere. And who knows? These people have stories for everything, but. Anyway, but I just wanted to mention, just to kind of give full disclosure so they can know what the part of the interview that they missed.
Yeah, he's just kind of.
And you may put the link to the interview in the description.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the description.
I don't know.
Yeah, he's giving a backdrop to like what led up to him, making this movie. The fact that he had been inspired by vampirism and all of that, and but again, you can tell that he knows what he's talking about. He's not a dumb guy by any stretch of the imagination. So, but yeah, let's continue.
Okay. All right.
Again, about vampires as a concept, because I think Karl Marx often used like vampirism to explain capitalism, right? And he constantly used it as a metaphor. And I thought it was so brilliant in this, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but the minute they kind of lose is when they seek the white man's money, right? Because that scene, they're kind of that situation with the plantation tokens, like, no, we can't do that. And in a way, what I thought was so interesting, how that was this idea of, I don't know, I think there's this idea that imperialism and colonialism and Western European ideals and Christianity, even when it comes to the Black Church, and this, and this is sacred and profane and how that kind of functions. But I thought it was really interesting how like the downfall is when they kind of opened up to try and take that gold money. But then even the way you've presented these vampires, even I love that he's an Irish, obviously he's been colonized as well, the history of that. But it was a kind of saying, you can have this utopian world where we're all equal. And it's these marginalized communities come together. And so I kind of want to get into like that kind of element of it because, there's so many ways vampires.
Now when she says that, she's talking about you can have this
utopian world
where now, correct me if I'm wrong. This is honestly my second time watching this interview.
Yeah.
So when she said so what is she referring to? Because if you notice, like, what world is she talking about? Yeah. Because if you notice, well, for me, as I watched the film, there's this world that's, I guess, ran or controlled by this woman here was described as like the white man's money, right? Because when you watch the film, and it's funny because all of the themes, that undergird Western civilization, Western philosophy. Let's just say, for example, post the Enlightenment. One of the key things, of course, is something like the universality of man, right? This idea that, we all may be particular in many respects, and I mean that's great. We all understand that, but there's a common thread that goes through us all. And so it's funny because, and these are a lot of the promises, right? The ideals of the West, right? Particularly, like I say, here in the United States. And what I found interesting in the film is that the vampire, because they're a group of, it starts off with one guy. I don't know where he came from. He just there, you encounter him at some point during the film, and
because he's running from the Native Americans.
He's running from some Native American vampire hunters, essentially is what they are. And so there is this there's this idyllic, sort of romanticized, if you will, depiction of Native American life, just in that small portion when Native Americans are represented. Because here are these vampire hunters, these noble guys, they, for whatever reason, they kind of know what's going on. You know what I mean? They understand, and they're hunting this guy. And it's clear, he's clearly, he's damaged, he's burnt. The sun is rising. The sun, right? The sun is rising. So this white guy, he goes and knocks on the door of this home that happens to be occupied by a white couple, a man and a woman, and they're suspicious of him in the beginning.
And you saw like the hood in the background, so I think they might have been a part of the Ku Klux Klan, maybe not. But I thought I saw like a white hood or something that.
We just left the theater. Just left. So I don't remember that.
Oh, okay.
No. I'm not saying it wasn't there. Yeah. But how you see that upon second and third viewing, you see things, pick up things you didn't see. So they're skeptical of him, but they eventually let him in. And the Native American guy is coming and he's telling them like, hey, if you come across this guy, I'm telling you right now, you in trouble, And she like, no, just go ahead on and we're fine, because she after her and the husband let the vampire in, she shoos the Native Americans away. She's skeptical of them, suspicious of them, and he says, okay, ma'am, have a lovely evening, or whatever he says, and he goes on about his business. He and his fellow tribesmen, they all gallop away on their horses, right? And the vampire guy, what happens? He attacks this married couple, kills, transforms them into vampires. So it begins as just three. In the film.
Started as one, ended up being three before they got to the juke joint. They came to the juke joint together.
Now, what I found strange, and I think that's what she's talking about, because it's almost like you have these two competing ideas of what utopia is. Because there's this sense that the minorities, again, not just blacks, because you have Asians represented,
Irish,
right? Yep. But see, the Irish, right? He's sort of like the lead vampire guy.
Yeah,
he's Irish.
The lead vampire. Yep.
Right. And then you get, of course, toward the end, and it's kind of weird because a lot of the ideas and themes and things of this nature are communicated vis-a-vis song. And sometimes as I'm sitting there listening, I'm trying to listen to what the lyrics are saying. But how sometimes you listen, you're hearing a song or you listen to a song and you don't pick up on every word. So I would have to actually see the sheet of the lyrics,
like the lyrics,
I can read it. I couldn't really understand it, but I got the sense, of course, toward there was the moment when they're kind of all outside the juke joint and they're kind of getting themselves all hype in a sense, what I'm saying? They're working themselves into a frenzy because they're going to, get the rest of the survivors who are still left in this juke joint, and they're listening to these like old Irish, kind of folk songs, and it's weird. And I'm gonna bring it back to why I stopped the video. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, of course, that there is this kind of long-standing Celtic tradition in the American South. Right. This is, at least in theory, of course, Thomas Sowell's theory in his Black Rednecks and White Liberals book that a lot of people like to make reference to. I don't know how many people who make reference to it have actually read it, but they like to make reference to it often. To me, it's not one of Thomas Sowell's best books, but it's a decent book. It's a good book. It's Thomas Sowell. It's going to be a good book. But there's also another book written on the topic of the white Southern culture called Cracker Culture. I can't remember who the author of that book is, and he talks about the Celtic tradition of the American South. And these attitudes and these kind of these cultural mores were, I guess, certain values and certain conventions that were transported from that part of the United Kingdom or the British Empire at the time and brought to the American South. And so that schism, that political and cultural schism in the American North and the American South was these kind of centuries old rivalry that goes, back to Europe, and the kind of, again, the cultural differences between the Gaelic speaking folks and the English speaking folks. And so there was a difference there, and many folks, theorize that the kind of greater Anglo Protestant dominated empire, or the English, and then eventually the British Empire, their dominance of, say, like the peoples of Ireland, peoples of Scotland. Of course, this had a lot to do with their prolonged contact prior to their Irish and Scottish subordinates to that of the Roman Empire. And so in many respects, the Anglican-speaking peoples were, that kind of cultural transmission from the Roman Empire reached them first. And so, there's a lot, you don't really have time to really get into, how the English Empire was forged. But it took a lot of toil, a lot of strife, a lot of warring clans and factions, and you heard about the wars and the conflicts between the Normans and the Saxons and so on. So it was a lot. It was a lot before there was any kind of semblance of English homogeneity within their culture. And so there always kind of been these differences, and you saw, like, toward the end, at a point where the lead vampire, who was kind of like the villain of the film, he kind of gives and I think he kind of does he like sing it, or he's like reciting some kind of
is that right, when he gets Sammy?
Yeah.
Well, that was actually, I think Sammy started saying the Lord's Prayer.
Okay. Yeah.
And then he started saying it too, and then the other vampires joined in and started saying it.
Yeah, and that's where you get the idea that we were all kind of brought into this.
And this religion, this Bible, all of this stuff was forced upon us.
Right.
It doesn't really mean anything, although I can understand why you still say it, because it makes you feel, it brings you comfort. But it really doesn't mean anything, because it was used to enslave you. It was used to make you subservient to the white race,
right? And so,
or European race,
right. And so to go back to what she's saying, and what I found strange is, or not just strange, but just rather, I don't know. I mean, it was blatant in terms of what I thought the filmmaker or makers were trying to say.
Well, the utopia was like, no rules. We get to do what we want to do. Right. We don't have to be bound by the limitations of systemic racism and oppression and all of these other things. We just get to live freely for eternal life. We can have heaven here on earth.
Right.
No systems.
Right. But see, they were remember, of course, because Coogler played on this age-old vampire trope that, of course, vampires can't come in; they have to be invited in.
Got to be invited in.
Right. And so, sometimes you oftentimes see the vampire, and there's a lot of sexual, kind of like eroticism when it comes to the vampire.
Oh yeah, because you saw when old girl got bit, she came in, she was horny. She's like, I'm ready to get down.
It kind of depicted in different ways. Sometimes the vampire was like this horrible looking, scary creature, and other times he's very
sexy.
He's very appealing and very sexy and handsome and attractive. And it's like, okay, this is interesting to see how different minds of people, different creatives, kind of play on it. And the theme with, I guess, sex and blood and a lot of horror, plays on women and their reproductive development, because I think the symbolism of the blood has a lot to do with the menstrual, not minstrel show, but the menstrual cycle. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I think a lot of horror has to do with this kind of. I think there are a lot of like gender or sexual politics, if you will, particularly within horror, and the quest, if you will, to I guess to kind of discover as men how to, I guess maybe circumvent some of the. I guess some of the negative, and I use the term negative very loosely in this sense, because of course with sexual contact, sexual relationships comes responsibility. And children, for example, right? And there's responsibility to take care of that child.
Absolutely.
Right. So once a woman hits reproductive maturity, sex can lead to a child. So how do we as men get around this hurdle getting what it is that we want, which is sex from the woman, without having to deal with
the responsibility that comes with it. Yeah.
And that responsibility that comes with it is the byproduct of her nature. That's the way God made her. So what do you do with that? Right. And so how do we, even doing so much as, okay, well, if we came up with a society where women didn't produce, children, then how could we as men use our ingenuity, if you will, to come up with a way or means by which to create life without procreation? And I think you see that in a lot of films as well. I think that goes all the way back to Mary Shelley. Frankenstein. How can man create life without that pesky little thing called a woman?
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm not the first to say this. A lot of people have kind of talked about this, especially when it came to the meaning of Frankenstein, what that meant. A lot of people think was man's attempt to sort of try to play God. And not bears mentioning, of course, that art could be multiple themes. Could be a lot of themes. Man's want to play God, but also man's way of figuring out how to deal with the problem of the woman. And so I think there's a lot of sex. Even one of my favorite horror films of all time is Alien. A lot of sexual innuendo in Alien.
Yeah.
This film, a lot of sex in this film. I was going to ask you, it struck me while we were sitting in the theater. I'm going to ask Dave, but I'm going to wait until we're on camera filming, because there was a lot of references to oral sex, which was, it was very conspicuous. It wasn't very,
Yeah, there was the one moment where Stack, the brother who was more of the slick talker, he was sort of coaching Sammy, the younger, more innocuous character, on how to go down on a woman. Obviously, he did end up doing that in the movie while they were partying, in the juke joint. But yeah, there was a lot of references to that for sure.
Yeah, in the white woman.
The white woman, she had a line, because this is after she got bit, and she came back in the party. Well, even before she got bit, when she first saw the brother, right? And she basically told him that,
you put your tongue in me.
Yeah, you
told me you love me.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and effed me hard, and this, that, and the third, or whatever. She did that, right? Yep.
There were about 4 or 5 different references to men, not fallacious, women
going down on men, but
it was the man going
down on the woman. Yeah,
there was about 5 different references to it. I don't know. I don't know what that meant, what it was trying to say with that, but. And I think of this idea of a utopia, and what the Irish lead vampire was saying when he was trying to get invited into the juke joint. Again,
he said something to piss off the Asian woman, where he basically could read her husband's thoughts. And he said, "Hey, I know how to go down on you and please you because I done read your husband's thoughts."
That was that. Yep. He made a reference to oral sex. Yeah. You didn't notice that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I was going to say, just to kind of move away from that, because I don't know what that's about. You're worshiping at the idol of the Vesica, the Vesica piece. If you're familiar with the Catholic symbology, oftentimes you'll see Jesus in the form of the almond shape. Right, and you'll see him coming through. Even some folks who have understanding of the occult, they look at because of course, in the minds of some people who aren't believers and in the Christian historicity of Christianity, in other words, they do not believe that the Bible is an historical account. They will say such things as, of course, we've all heard the story of the explanation of the gospel, that, of course, it is just a rehashed tale of astrology, right? And so Jesus being the one, and with the Son, followed by his 12 disciples, the 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 plus 1 equals 13. There you have
So it's like the personification of astrology.
Yeah, the personification of the Sun and the Sun's movements through the heavenly bodies. Right. Again, this is a whole why a lot of occult people who practice the occult are obsessed again with the number 13, and there's this kind of significance of Jesus Christ with the fish, and that having a lot to do with the zodiac sign of Pisces. And so you look at the fish, of course, it's sort of almond shaped. You turn it, on his side. Of course, Jesus is symbolic of the fish. Of course, people who believe in the occult believe that the sun itself takes on a very specific character when it's in the house of Pisces, right?
You had to mention my sign,
right? And so when Jesus in the Bible says that he will be with you to the end of the age, or eon. What he really means is not an end of the world. It's a coming into a new age, right? And I believe we now, this was supposed to be like this transition that began to occur in the year 2012. Remember, there was all of this mysticism surrounding the year 2012. You made a film called 2012. And so the sun is now supposedly transitioning into the Aquarian age, right? Which, of course, if you study the occult and listen to some of the people who claim to understand it, some of its practitioners, I've also heard that the age of Aquarius is also the age of quote unquote homosexuality.
Oh wow!
Because the age of Aquarius is what? You look at the Aquarius is the symbol, the archetype of the Aquarian age, or the sign of Aquarius. I'm sorry, is the light, is the water bearer. He who brings water, and so on and so forth. And so, seeing as how all things are taken, stolen, and bastardized, right? So they say the Aquarian age, because that, again, this is what Christianity did as the Europeans began to colonize and imperialize, and this goes all the way back to the Greeks. Greeks, and they came into the Near East and Northern Africa, created the Library of Alexandria. It just goes on and on and on. And so all of these ancient sacred secrets from Africa and from parts of Asia were all kind of compiled. I know I'm saying a lot, but it was all kind of compiled at one time in the Library of Alexandria, and then I forgot, it was I think it was an Arab king or general or something that allegedly commissioned the Library of Alexandria to be burned down and destroyed. And so a lot of the ancient secrets and things of this nature were lost. Some of it went underground, right? There's a lot of theories and thoughts and ideas. Well, the idea, right, is that, Christianity took these things that it didn't really understand, or perhaps it wanted to take the things, the secrets, if you will, of it, and kind of create a means by which to amass power by giving you something fake and keeping the real for themselves. So even if that meant plagiarizing, even if that meant having to make things up or take things that are loosely based on actual source material, which were ancient secrets and things of this nature, ancient stories that predate the time of Jesus, heck, even predates the time of Abraham, right? To create something that would, satisfy their fleshly wants and desires, because in all actuality, these aren't really like spiritual people. So if you go back to the Aquarian age, right, they say, well, this is something that they stole from the Greek pantheon, or the Greek legend of the god of Ganymede, right? If you ever heard the story of Ganymede, Ganymede was a boy, and he was kidnapped. He was kidnapped by Zeus. Zeus came in the form of an eagle and took Ganymede. If you go online and you read it up and study Greek mythology, you'll see the images of Ganymede being taken by this big bird. And this bird is supposed to symbolize Zeus. And you'll even see in the Bible, right? God comes down not as an eagle, but a dove. You see. And so, there's more Christian theft, right? Is what they say. So Zeus comes down, he takes Ganymede, he brings him up to Mount Olympus, and Ganymede becomes essentially a sex slave of the gods. They rape him. Right. And I'm giving you the extremely short version of the story. And for his services, I guess, he's given a gift. He's given a chalice or like a pitcher of water. And he essentially becomes one of them. He becomes like them. He's given the gift of immortality. Essentially becomes one of the gods. I know probably some people who are watching who are more well versed in Greek mythology can correct me on some of the details that I may be butchering here. But again, a lot of people will say that, well, look at what we have going on in the United States, especially like with the LGBTQ agenda. This is simply indicative of the coming of this new age. You understand what I'm saying? And so maybe, to bring it back, that again, because this is why I brought up some of those things with the age of Aquarius and the age of Pisces, because of the fish. Again, like I say, sometimes it's called a vesica. Or even when you look at the ovum shape on the top of the ankh, like you have the tau cross, that's just like the T, and you have what they call in Catholicism the vesica, essentially on top of the tau, and you have the ankh. And so you hear a lot of people say, well, this is the masculine tau or the phallus with the ovum atop the phallus. So you have the male female kind of coming together, and that kind of represents the divinity. It represents God, because the two have essentially become one.
Oh wow.
Right. And so I don't know, man. I think maybe with the oral sex, I don't know if that's a kind of homage, a kind of worshiping at the yoni, right? Because the woman's vagina is it kind of has that oval shape, that fish shape.
Yeah,
you shouldn't smell like that, ladies. If you smell like that,
no, good point, man, and great history lesson.
So this is me just trying to unpack why
did they reference it so much, especially during that time too, right? Yeah. Where I would have thought it would have been maybe more inappropriate, maybe not. I don't know. I mean, today it seems normal.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, it's things that we're doing sexually. I'm sure
they was doing it too.
Doing it all.
They was doing it too. Yeah.
Since the beginning of time, you know what I'm saying? Coming up with creative ways to experience the feelings of sexual pleasure.
But the fact that the women were like the ones saying it, they were the ones. Like, I don't know. Yeah. It wasn't the men who were saying, "Hey, yeah, I'm gonna go down and do this on you." It was the women who was like, "Yo, what's up? You gonna do this, or you remember when you did this?" And and
within a lot of like the pro-black Hotep kind of black kind of stuff, you do see a lot of this worship, this kind of worship of the black female mother goddess energy, that whole thing of the black woman kind of being God. You hear quacks like Umar Johnson saying these kinds of things, and other such loathsome characters, they will say these things. And so I think there was a kind of a black, a kind of a goddess, this kind of goddess worship of the black woman. Yeah. But because again, in the movie you heard men talking about it. Of course, you heard Stack teaching Sammy. You heard the Irish head vampire talking to the Asian lady, saying what he would do to her after reading her husband's thoughts. But you heard women actually saying it a lot too, and that was something that was something to think about for sure. I'm sure it was taking place during that time, because nothing is new under the sun. They were doing it and expressing it in their own different way. But it is interesting that it came up that many times. Yeah. And I don't think it was an accident.
It probably wasn't an accident. No, because I mean, especially when we get into this interview and figure out how much other stuff wasn't an accident. So
the Irish vampire, he was saying things. Now here's the thing. And we didn't get back to the bill in a long time. But here's the thing. Because a lot of people don't realize that, Marx, and she mentioned Marx.
She mentioned Karl Marx. This is the first time that she mentioned Karl Marx in the interview.
Marx, of course, I don't prescribe to his solutions. But Marx was right about some of the things that he saw and some of the things that he understood, not in terms of like his prophecies, right? Because I mean, that's essentially how he came across, or how he fashioned himself, right? He was like a prophet.
Yeah.
I say that, Karl Marx is the god of leftism, and Vladimir Lenin is his prophet, right? He understood. So
Karl Marx laid the foundation, and Vladimir Lenin put it into practice. I got you. Okay.
Again, even though Karl Marx wasn't the first theoretician of his type, of his kind,
but he popularized it.
Popularized it because
amongst the intelligentsia.
Yeah, amongst the intelligentsia. Because see, Not even, and Marx didn't become this larger than life figure until well after his death, because his contemporaries really didn't know who he was. He was a very small man, a very low man on a totem pole within the community of philosophers the world over at the time, because none of his contemporaries, John Stuart Mill, none of them they didn't know who he was. They didn't speak about him. And Marx was very bitter and angry about this, because he fashioned himself. He saw himself as this kind of brilliant man. And the fact that no one was really paying him any attention, it really vexed him. It really got under his skin, especially, the religious figures that were gaining a lot of ground, a lot of attention at the time. Because again, he hated religion, but he understood. A lot of people think that Karl Marx is a betrayal of Western values. In many respects, you can call it a perversion, or maybe you can even consider Karl Marx the climax of the death of the promise of the Enlightenment. All right, and that's another thing that people don't want to hear. But in some respects, I think there is some truth to that. And so when I hear the guy, he was telling them things. Remember, he's trying to get into the juke joint. He's talking about his, my money, come here and spend my money. We can all bond. We can all come together based on our love of music. We just want to perform.
Right. Yeah.
We got something we want to say.
Yep.
We just want to hang with y'all. We just want to be with y'all together in love and in brotherhood. And this is why Marxism is why it sinks its fangs into everything.
It's so appealing.
Particularly because it reminds me of something the great Whittaker Chambers said in 1948 during his congressional testimony when he was exposing the communist conspiracy. He talked about, because he was asked, I forgot who it may have been Robert Stripling who posed the question in the House investigation toward Whittaker Chambers about what makes Marxism so attractive to people who found a way, who found success in this context, within our system, within the American way of life, found prosperity. These are some of the smartest, brightest people. Why are they willing to betray their country like this? Why do they want to destroy it like this? And he said that, he in so many words, I wish I could quote him verbatim, because it was so enlightening if you go and read this testimony from Whittaker Chambers. And again, being a former communist himself, he certainly could relate. And he lived on over a decade of his life in the communist underground. He talked about Christianity, and he said that this is how these people approach. It's almost like this zeal, this love they have for their fellow man is sort of what is driving it. It's like this Christian-like commitment, this Christian-like love that they want to put it into suffering, that they want to, you know what I mean? And so that's why a lot of people could say, well, if you're a Christian, for example, how can you not be in favor of social justice? How can you not get on board with this? What kind of Christian wouldn't want to do this?
That's what the Jamal Bryants and those type of pastors say.
Jesus Christ himself, of course, right? Was if he was alive today, he'd be a socialist. That's what he talks about. Brotherhood and this and that, right? And of course, we know that that's not, you're cherry picking things in order to distort, right? Because that's what they're doing. And so that's what that's what the vampire was doing. And I'm listening to him because if you look at the foundation of what he was saying, he was telling the truth, but he was the one who was saying it. Here's this, white guy. He's, head vampire. He's trying to come in. The audience knows he ain't no good, right? And as the audience, we're sitting back and we're waiting for the characters in the film to pick up on it. But he's saying things that if you're a reasonable person, you're like, all right, bro, come on in. That's cool. That makes sense. But see, the black folk, they want to keep him out, of course, because he's white and they don't want the word to
And he
spread.
alluded to that. He said, I get what this is, and pointed to his skin.
Yeah, you don't want to let me
color
in because I'm white. You know what I mean? He said, well, yeah, because you're going to go around, you're going to tell your buddies, and they're going to find out there's a bunch of black people out here partying and having a good time. And next thing you know, I'm going to be in trouble. They're going to shut me down. They might come and kill us or whatever, And so they're like, no, you can't come in. But I'm sitting there listening to him make his case. And I'm saying, these are all Western values. These are all things that we cherish. These are things that we believe in, right? But they're telling the audience because he's the epitome of evil as a vampire, but he's saying nice sounding things out of his mouth. So telling the black folks, if somebody tells you that the American idea is about racial harmony, Or how about I got money, I just want to come break bread. Embrace the free market. So we're going to get into what you're talking about, Marx. What the hell does Marx have to do with vampires? He's saying, well, embrace the free market. All right? But he really wants to come in and kill you. He wants to come in and hurt you. So I'm like, wow, they are taking American principles and they're putting it in the words of an evil man.
An evil person, right? Wow. Crazy. You ready to get into more of it? That's crazy.
Yeah,
man.
and she remember she mentioned, she talked about the plantation money, right? Because these people kind of had their own underground economy where they weren't trading in legal tender, right? American currency. So they're trying to find ways to barter without,
like they had these wooden
little chips.
Yep.
You know, and at a point, one of Michael B. Jordan's, one of the brothers, he like, man, listen, I don't. Why you letting these motherfuckers pay with this ain't worth nothing?
Exactly.
Like, man, come on, bro. They play attention, but come on, man. Just let them, know. And no, that's what she's saying. And so black folks kind of have their own, unique economic thing happening in the moment, as she said, that you start to accept capital from the white man. That's when you let the evil in, because the vampire, the person who lends you the capital, they just want to prey upon you.
They want to exploit your talent. Yeah.
Exploit your talent. Or in the case of Marx, the capitalist wants to exploit your labor.
Your labor, right.
Right? Because he has to, and Coogler and this lady, they don't have the foggiest. They haven't really studied Marx. They don't know they know the bare minimum, or they think they do. Right?
Well, he knows how it relates to the Black Panther Party because he's from Oakland. He's gonna get into that too. So
I'm trying to debate on what I think it's a good time to go back to the video, because as she said, she talks about Marx, vampires, and essentially exploitation. So capitalism is exploitation.
Yeah, capitalism is viewed as bad, and Marxism. Equality, all of these things, people being in favor of the proletariat, all of these things are considered good, right?
Right.
So
and the people who want to lend you money are the people who are trying to take advantage.
They're trying to take advantage of you.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going.
Anne Rice's take on it, all these things. Joel Gomez in the Gilda stories is like, unity is the best thing.
You're really sharp. But I gotta ask you something.
Okay.
What if the vampires didn't show up? What happens to those people?
Well, exactly. It's like the same thing. It's humans and vampires aren't that different, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, the better the devil but...
Yeah,
so,
but I mean like that, the reality is, for them, everybody at that juke was gonna be dead anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that was fucked before they...
Yeah.
Before Stack and Mary decided to go out there and try to get that, they were fucked essentially the moment that they bought the meal.
So do you see that as like kind of the way it's presented, that actually, again, these systems, like these, sorry, I'm just like very deep about this, but
no, I understand.
So you see what she's saying too about, or what he said is that they were screwed over no matter what. So even if the vampires hadn't gave them that tip, because one of the head Klansmen, his nephew had became a vampire. And the head vampire said, hey, I read his mind. They was basically using this juke joint as a slaughterhouse. They were going to come kill you anyway, right? So what Ryan Coogler is saying is that they were damned if they do, damned if they don't. So either the Ku Klux Klan was going to get them or the vampires were going to convert them. But from the head vampire's perspective, he wasn't killing them. He was giving them eternal life, right? So I find it interesting that he kind of pointed that out. And then she's alluding to the fact that no matter what you do, you can't win because the system is going to basically inhibit you, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
There's
no way to win.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, what do you think he meant by that? Because I was still kind of processing it, trying to work my way through. But I think that's a pretty plausible explanation. He says that they were screwed anyway.
That's the system.
The vampires never came.
Might as well not vote. Because we screwed anyway. We in a lose-lose game.
Right, because I guess the Klan...
I'm not saying don't vote.
Because I guess, like you said, I guess the Klan was coming to get him anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So that's what he said.
And the Klan had no redeeming qualities. Let's just say, and I'm not saying that they should have redeeming qualities, but there are cases of like black people who were actually a part of the Ku Klux Klan. Like he could have done somewhat of a good job of maybe giving them some type of redemptive qualities, but they didn't have any. They represented the devil outright. The vampires were actually somewhat, I don't know. I mean, there was even black people who watched the movie who was saying like, man, I don't know. I mean, maybe they should have got bit and turned into a vampire based on these arguments that the head vampire was making. But the Ku Klux Klan was just looked at as outright, evil. I think the alternative would have been for people to prefer being a vampire versus being caught by the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah. And that's why, because, what I'm saying? Because again, if it's almost like you stand on principle. It's like they'll get you anyway. You know, if you kind of sell out, sell your soul, and you become a vampire, and then it kind of feeds into what the mid credit scene was talking about. You know what I mean? It's like that's the last time you'll ever see happiness again. When you actually had the opportunity to just indulge in blackness and just to be. Be your own and kind of
be free, be liberated for that one day.
For that one day, and just kind of just to be yourself. But I remembered, I don't remember, but it's funny, man, because I started to bring a notepad and a pen into the
just
theater,
be writing in there, But
I was like, man, it's gonna be dark. I'm gonna have my phone out. I try to be respectful of other people because, there were some other people in the theater. And so I'm like, hey, I said, so I was, if you not have my phone, I
saw you, scrolling.
I was looking up things as they were talking. I was like, wait a minute, what is this? Who is that? I was taking little notes, and I'm like, oh, okay. And it was one, and I'll probably say that because it's something that I did write down on one of my notepads because it plays on the contrast between kind of material riches and the invaluable nature of things of the spirit, because there was the moment in the film when Smoke, Michael B. Jordan's character, the dude that wore the blue, and I've seen a lot of people online talking about the symbolism of them being twins and the blue and the red
dichotomy. Yep.
And so I don't know what that's about. And I haven't really heard many people give comment. I know I've seen the videos of people giving commentary what the twins meant, but I haven't looked into it myself. I may have a light bulb moment as I'm talking to you, because of course there is some twin things with Satan and God, of course, and even to kind of go back to some like African spiritual systems where the deity of the twin are really just it's kind of opposite aspects, if you will, of the same deity.
Yin
right?
and yang, yeah.
So the yin and yang, right? It's the brothers from Osar and Set or Seth. They're like brothers, but they're one and the same, right? And even if you look at it from a Christian standpoint, those who, again, claim to have an esoteric understanding, for example, of biblical scripture, when you look at the last verse of the Bible in the book of Revelations, where, of course, Christ refers to himself as the light bearer, right? You say, well, that's Lucifer. Okay, well, Jesus at the end of the Bible reveals to the reader that he, in fact, is Lucifer, or has been Lucifer the entire time, right? And and this is not me communicating my understanding. I'm just going off what I hear other people say, And me personally, when it comes to the Book of Revelations, I try not to get too sure of myself, because even biblical scholars are very conflicted in terms of what the book of Revelation actually means, because it is the most mysterious and most misunderstood books in all the Bible. And so, I try not to deal with it because I haven't given it the time needed in order to really fully flesh it out. But there's also that as well, this idea that, of course, like Lucifer saved you from your perfection, but Jesus God in the form of Jesus saves you from your imperfection, right? Because perfection essentially is death. Because no matter what we do, we don't want to just sit in Eden forever. Right? That's why we eat of the tree. Because
we want the knowledge.
We want the knowledge, but not only do we want the knowledge, we want the sensation. We just want to feel.
Yeah.
I heard why do we even try to love? Why do we even try to be in relationships? Most of the relationships you're gonna be in ain't gonna work. You know, you try to find the one if you want to get married, but even you go into the situation knowing that your marriage may not work out, but you take the chance anyway. I was listening to Dennis Prager say something. This was right after his dog died. I don't know if people watch Dennis Prager's content. I will watch it from time to time. I think Dennis Prager is a very wise man. I know a lot of people got issues with him or whatever, and I think we'll probably get into this because I do want to briefly talk about the 500-pound Jew in the room, especially when we're talking about Hollywood. But Prager had this dog that would always be in his. The dog's name Otto, and Otto died. He had a English bulldog. And when Prager would do his little fireside chats, his dog would just be sitting there. Right, Otto died, and so the audience was like, "Oh man, Otto died," whatever. And Dennis Prager, he was kind of broken up about it because you bond, I guess, with your animals over time. And he asked the question. He said, "Why do people buy dogs and they know that they're probably going to outlive the dog? Dog's lifespan is 10 to 15 years, maybe, and you're going to bond with it, and eventually, if it lives out its life, you're going to end up putting it to sleep." But we buy dogs anyway. We care for them. We love them anyway, knowing that we're going to outlive. Why do we do that? And Dennis Prager just said, in his opinion, it's because that it's the ride. It's not so much the destination. It's the fact that even if it means hurting, even if it means pain, people would much rather feel pain than to feel nothing. Mm-hmm. Right? It's the sensation. They just want to feel. They want to be alive. Right? It's just like death itself, right? The idea of oblivion, right? It's like, well, you don't believe in an afterlife. What happens when you die? Like, what does it feel like? What do you see? The same thing you saw before you came into being. Do you remember what life was like before you were here? Like, no. Well, death is kind of like that. Wow, that's terrifying. Can you imagine? Oblivion, nothing. You're just gone. It's almost more terrifying than the idea of actually going to hell, not feeling anything. I would rather feel fire than to feel nothing. Now, of course, I'm being a bit tongue-in-cheek, but you get my point. Mm-hmm. All right, it's kind of like pick your poison. So people would much rather feel something than to sit. Because I don't want to just be in perfection. Even if it means I got to go out and feel the pain of life, I at least want to feel it. So that way I feel alive. Because being perfected or being cared for and being in paradise doesn't make me feel like I'm alive. That's why when you listen to a lot of these occultists, a lot of these Luciferians, they'll tell you that, well, Lucifer is actually the hero of the story. Mm-hmm. Right? And God is the villain of the story because God creates this evil thing, this evil world that he ultimately has all the control over, but yet he won't change it. He won't fix it. He expects you to just live through it. What kind of God would do that? And they start getting off into all of that kind of stuff, right? Kind of like the typical kind of atheistic bullet points that, the bullet points that atheists run down. So I don't know, man, maybe that's some the significance or whatever, like with the twin and everything.
I think it is, and I think as we get through the interview, it's gonna basically prove what you're saying to be true about duality in terms of just embracing the flesh versus rejecting it versus trying to transcend it versus trying to be Christ-like. How about you embrace these things, because the evil stuff is just as significant as the good nature of people. Because
the only thing the white man and his work will offer you is power, money, and these kinds of things. It's almost to say, like, this world that the white man created is devoid of any real spiritual content. Again, in the Christianity that they forced upon you, which they say, which is a line that a few characters say explicitly.
A couple of times. They say that even right before that whole scene with the whole musical diaspora showing Sammy singing, and he's conjuring up these spirits from the past and the future, and they all like involved in the scene where they dancing and playing music and all of that stuff. So right before that scene, I think Delroy Lindo's character, Delta Blue, he says basically this is real, this is sacred, right? In the Bible, that stuff that was forced on you. So, and he about to say it. We're gonna get into it.
I just think it's really interesting because I think so often vampires traditionally are very wealthy. They they don't give back. Whereas these are guys who are like, apart from like Near Dark or like Lost Boys, you rarely see.
I love those movies, by the way.
But they're kind of impoverished vampires, so I'm I feel like you've got. I want to say it's like the first actual Marxist vampire movie because it feels what you're trying to do there. And
you know where I'm from?
No,
I'm from Auckland.
Auckland, okay.
Zinj. Fuck. Help. Yeah. I'm loving talking to you. Like, but I don't know how comfortable I feel.
Words, dude.
Yeah, I know.
Why does he have this reaction like he just got caught?
Because he did get caught, and I think it's something that they had talked about. You know, him and his wife. The person that he talked to the most about this film while making it, while thinking about it, was his wife. And I think she's kind of his partner now in his production company called Proximity. I think they actually produced the film. So they've had intimate conversations about this. He kept mentioning, you know where I'm from, right? And then also I heard that she basically said that the vampires aren't necessarily wealthy. Like in the series Twilight, I forgot how many movies they came out with. They had money. So you could somewhat associate those vampires with capitalism, but I think he was intentional about not doing that in this movie for a reason. So basically, with him and his wife, they've had these talks about this movie. They've had these talks about Oakland and the Black Panther Party. We know that he's inspired by them. I think he actually produced that movie. What was it called? The Black Messiah or something like that. I think it was about Fred Hampton film, right? And I think the game plan was, listen, we don't want this movie to become too political, because once it becomes political, especially in this Trump era, we're going to have people boycotting the film, and it's going to be getting pressed for the wrong reasons. And we don't want that. So let's not talk about this, which is why he called for his wife. But he was already in the thick of it by this point.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'll push back a little, because I don't know if Ryan Coogler cares too much. I mean, maybe the whole Marxism thing, because even before I saw this video, I didn't hear anybody say that. I kept hearing that, well, it's another one of those films that's just meant to make white people look bad, and it's an anti-white film, and it's an anti-Christian film.
You didn't hear anything
about Marxism? I didn't hear anything about Marxism or being
because I think it was cloaked and dressed up and all of this other stuff. It was hard to detect.
Yeah, nobody said it was anti-capitalist or anti-free market until I saw this interview, and then when I went in and watched the film, you know what I'm saying, I could clearly see. And when he said, you know, I'm from Oakland, right, and when he says that, he's gonna say it like, doesn't he say it more than one time?
More than one time, he kept saying it.
You know, Oakland, this is a big part, and he doesn't go into detail about why you keep saying that. Because I'm gonna tell you something. A lot of black folks who watched the film, and did you catch? Side note, did you catch at the end when, you know, of course, you know, Smoke, he could have ran away, but you know, he wanted revenge. He takes off the sacred amulet.
The same thing that stopped his brother from biting him.
Right.
Right. It was the hoodoo stuff that basically saved his life.
But not only did the hoodoo save his life from the vampires when his brother had him pinned down and was getting ready to bite him, but the hoodoo actually saved him while he was in fighting the First World War.
Oh yeah, when he was with Capone and all them doing his thing.
Because remember when his lady. Or the lady and that's another thing I thought was maybe some subtle symbolism a bit, because you know he has sex with the woman, so he loves her. That's his kind of love interest, right?
They had a baby who passed away. Yeah,
but look at her, she's not an ugly woman. She's physical face. She's pretty.
She's dark skinned, more heavy set.
But they kind of like a mammy, kind of like an Aunt Jemima type caricature. Or archetype, not so much a caricature, because I thought the role was depicted in not a gratuitous way, but just in a very very
it was multidimensional,
very nuanced way. But I thought it was interesting that, you know, again, here's Michael B. Jordan. When you look at Sammy and his love interest, who I want to get into, by the way, but when you look at his love interest, that's the kind of woman you would probably see someone who is of Michael B. Jordan's level of attractiveness.
Beautiful dark woman, physically
slim,
fit,
body curve.
Yeah.
You would think that.
I would think that would be.
But Michael B. Jordan is into this out of shape, heavy set, Aunt Jemima kind of woman. And I just thought, I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Does it mean anything? I don't think anything is superficial in this movie. Especially, I mean, given the how much thought and how much conversation is centered around this movie. Now you're like forced to look at every little thing. why is Michael B. Jordan, why is he attracted to her? I mean, not to say, men, okay, she whatever, she got a pulse, I hit it, you know what I'm saying? But it's like deeper than that. He actually, I guess, actually loves her. And so when they get into this argument, and she's saying, "Boy, you ain't think I was praying for you? You didn't think I was?" Because I'm trying to remember when she gave it to him, because it wasn't. He was already wearing it.
He was already wearing it. He took it off, and then she did some more stuff with it, maybe to extend its
that's what happened.
Its protection life cycle or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And she told him, she said, while you were in the war, because they fought in the First World War, right? They were soldiers.
Yeah.
And they hinted at the fact that they had served in the military. And she said, "Yeah, you want to talk?" He like, "Man, I ain't with all this hoodoo magic, spirits and this and this and
Basically,
that."
like, it didn't save our baby, and she was like, "But it saved you. You came back here in one piece."
Yeah, you came back in one piece. She said, "Who you think was praying for you and saying spells, doing whatever people in her position, whatever they
Hoodooism,
do?"
yep.
Yeah, she's like, I was conjuring up that. I was putting that protection on you, and that's why you made it out of here alive. You survived the Prohibition Wars in Chicago. Now you back down here because I was putting that hedge of protection on you, right?
Basically, African culture and religion saved you, right? Yeah.
And so at the end, he it's funny because I knew, I said this isn't going to have a. There's no happy ending, but I knew right there. I said once he took off the, what do you call it?
He resigned to his fate.
He resigned to his fate. I was like, he's going to die now. I don't know what's about to happen. I'm thinking maybe it's one lone surviving vampire was going to get him. I'm waiting on a jump scare. And he's pulling out guns. What the hell is he doing? And I was like, oh, that's right. He remembered my man told him the Klan was coming. Mm-hmm. And so he waited to ambush him. And so he's, probably using his military training. He's waiting and he's lying in wait, waiting in the bushes. As soon as the mob, the lynch mob drives up, wee-haw, the good old boys come. He start taking them out. And I know you heard it, but it was one little white couple that was sitting a few chairs down from us, but most people in the theater were black.
They start clapping.
They started cheering.
Yeah.
Did you hear them?
Yeah, I heard them.
So when Michael B. Jordan is letting off, he's killing all these white guys, Tarantino style. Black people in the audience in the theater started cheering,
including the white couple. Yeah.
I get them.
Yeah.
But those are the kinds of people. To bring it back to this, when he talks about, I'm from Oakland, and she brings up Marxism, he says, I'm from Oakland. And most folks who look at the Black Panther Party, Huey P. Newton or whoever else, to the extent that they can even name a member of the Black Panther Party, they don't know what that means. They don't know what that means. You think half these black folks out here, man, who are, pro-black, fist in the air, word to your mother, Karl Marx, who? What you talking about? They don't have they wouldn't have the foggiest idea what you talking about. Maybe now some dialogue is starting to happen, but even to the extent that you could convince people that the Black Panther Party were doctrinaire Marxists, right? Were these pro Soviet, these pro Castro, communist fifth column in the United States. They can't tell you why that's bad. Even to the extent that you can convince them that it exists, that it's real, that people like, Huey P. Newton was a college educated, ideologue, recruited in many respects, particularly like in some of his lieutenants, other prominent Black Panther Party members like Eldridge Cleaver, one time Minister of Information, right? That he was essentially kind of recruited into the movement.
He wrote the book Soul on Ice.
Soul on Ice. Yep. What I'm saying? Of course, he was recruited into the movement by a lot of leftist Jews that were out in the California Berkeley area at the time. Right, men like Michael Lerner and Robert Scheer and these kinds of individuals, and they essentially had the plan. When I say they, I'm talking about a lot of red diaper babies, as they call them, right? These doctrinaire Marxists who were coming of age, were transitioning into early adulthood by the 1960s, and sort of looking for a new cause, right? Because The death of Joseph Stalin had marked a pivotal shift in the international left and their perspective and how they viewed the Soviet Union. And so whilst Khrushchev pledged to essentially de-Stalinize the Soviet Union, you had a whole new kind of slew or at least two examples of the coming forth of this sort of new North Star, this new communist frontier, one in Cuba, China, maybe even three, and you had another, of course, in Vietnam. Okay, so this became like this was the new Marxism of the latter 20th century, as opposed to being, I guess, defined by a more Stalinesque style of Marxism. You had a more Maoist style of Marxism, and this is what the Black Panther Party favored, right? A more kind of bringing in different kind of like more Maoist aspect. And again, we don't have really time to walk through the philosophy.
But I think you're saying that the latter is just a bit harder. It's a bit harder to detect.
It's harder to detect, of course. And when people think, okay, well, here you have black folks, right? And they're being put upon by the system, by police, and by this and by that, and it's just like, enough is enough. We ain't gonna take this no more. And so, they rise up because they want liberation, whatever that's supposed to mean, whatever that's supposed to look like. They never tell us. I don't know, perhaps it's having your own juke joint, having your own business without having to rely on the money or the wealth and the resources of the quote unquote white man.
And being able to have transient sexual relationships with people that don't mean anything, that don't amount to anything, right. Meaningless relationships and connections. Yeah.
So that's it. And so, they talk about this stuff, but they don't say, no. But there's a model. Mm-hmm. There is this pre-existing tradition of left-wing thought, if you will, that the 1950s, 60s, 70s, it marks a certain moment in that whole thing, that whole trajectory. This is just an iteration of something much larger. Mm-hmm. You can't get the average black folk to even wrap their mind around that because they haven't even begun to even to fully understand.
Well, it's hard to, number one, because I think with a lot of black people, we're so attached to our black identity that we can't oftentimes try to be objective enough to understand how things came to be, so to speak. And even the people who do know history, like Ryan Coogler, and he seems to be well versed not only when it comes to black culture, but various other cultures. But he sees things through a Marxist Black Panther lens, so he's not gonna tell it objectively either.
Right, because the Black Panther Party, right? They're the heroes, and so I guess. Anyone who's who's a Marxist, especially if they want to, liberate you and do all of these things, right? I guess they're the good guys, right? In the story. That's what
I took from it. I kind of looked at it as Marxism is the good guy, right? Right. The thing that's going to actually liberate you, and what's bad is what the Europeans pretty much forced on us, which is capitalism, Christianity, these sorts of things. So I see Marxism as being, or Karl Marx and his doctrine being the good guy in this film. Right. And I think this pretty much unwrapped it. The reason why I couldn't see it initially is because it was so confusing, and the movie was trying to be so many things at once. But that's what Marxism is. It's sort of all over the place, and there are no good guys or no bad guys, because you're supposed to embrace both sides, so to speak. There's no good and evil in a sense, or there is good and evil, but not in a way that I think I view it. So it was hard for me to really understand what was going on in that.
Of course, there is no objective morality.
There we go. The postmodernist view, right? Everything is a social construct.
Right. And postmodernism, that was the thing that came about later. But even when you want to go back to Vladimir Lenin once famously said that when it comes to Marxists beliefs when it comes to morality is they say such things, or Lenin quite literally said, and I'm quoting him, that we don't believe in any morality that proceeds from the supernatural, right? Everything is about what serves class interests, right? And that's what should guide one's conscience.
Wait, so you're saying that you're not getting your values from the transcendental, you're getting your values from man, pretty much.
Yeah.
We know what's best for us. Man isn't
not only that, but your morality and how you contextualize and conceptualize what is right and wrong is based upon what scholars refer to as standpoint epistemology. And epistemology is just a fancy way of saying knowledge, or the study of how knowledge is acquired. And so you are limited in what it is that you can actually understand if you find yourself to be the occupant of a certain class. And this is, and for example, you're talking this kind of race-based Marxism, then we as Black people, we have a totally separate set of moral rules and expectations and all sorts of other things. And so considering the fact that we have our own unique, if you will, a set of do's and don'ts and rules and so on and so forth, then it is, I guess, inherently bad or unjust to even prop up such ideas as equal treatment under the law, for example, right? Because considering the fact that we as oppressed minorities, or considering the fact that we are oppressed, right, we have higher moral claims. And so therefore you can't hold us to the same standard of law that you would otherwise hold yourself to because of how we as Black folks, considering the fact that we are oppressed, we have a greater propensity for law breaking. And so this is why you have to get to the root cause of the problem before you can even talk about equality under the law. And we know that Black folks are being oppressed because we have a higher propensity for law breaking, because if everything was evil like you claim, then it wouldn't be this way.
So it's not because of
no,
we have no autonomy over our decision making.
No.
And we're not capable of making mistakes that put us in a bind or anything like that. It has to be because of something else,
right, because
that's causing us to do this.
Right.
So we can always evade responsibility for things and blame what's happening on somebody else.
Because your subjective, you are not the object in a sense. You are the subject of. You are an object. You're that object of someone else, the creation of this larger thing, whether they're talking about whether systems or white supremacy, racism, and so on and so forth. And so when you hear folks to go back to this whole notion of postmodernism, right, this subjectivism, I think even the term postmodernism, I think was coined by an architect. His last name was Jinks. Alan Jinks? Anyway, that's nor here nor there. But I don't think it was initially like a political thing. But it really kind of got its start in literature, of course. Amongst a small cadre of French literary critics, right, Michel Foucault and others, right. But you get this idea that, well, how do we know what's right and what's wrong, right? Your circumstances shape the way you see the world. And so if you are a Black person and, you have to worry about somebody white doing something, or police, or, not getting qualified for a loan because of the color of your skin, or not being given a job because of the color of your skin, it can make you angry, make you bitter, make you upset. And so, your rage, your anger, your resentment, right, can lead to bad behavior. And so it isn't so much that we can objectively say this is right and this is wrong. You can't say to a person what's right and what's wrong, because that person has a totally different point of view, because they are the product of a totally separate set of circumstances. So how is it that, and this is a deep philosophical question, because how do you toe the line? How do you walk the line between cultural partiality or cultural particularities and the Western idea of universal brotherhood? Because every group is going to be different, But when you say that, well, at the heart, we're all the same, kind of like with it plays into the Christian ethos of the priesthood. I think it's in the book of Peter, the priesthood, right, of all believers, or just in general, when you hear Christians talk about, well, we are family in Christ. This is my brother in Christ. This is my sister in Christ. Black, white, doesn't matter. God doesn't see us that way, right? But at the same time, we're all different in that we, as separate human beings who are from separate groups, we all sort of come together in this kind of utopian sense, but we all give this kind of unique picture of the world that can kind of highlight the glory of the Creator and all of its little idiosyncrasies in a sense. So in many ways, everyone sort of has their own unique role to play in the whole of the human experience, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but where do you draw the line between, okay, we'll let you get away with doing that, we'll allow that because that's just your culture, that's just the way you are, and saying, no, that's wrong, and if you do that, right, here are the consequences for doing that thing.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those questions that human beings are going to struggle with for time immemorial. But of course, Bible believers, Christians, and even Jews, for example, very kind of similar theological or the same kind of theological roots. But of course, they took divergent paths at a point. It says that's not the point of the conversation. But the idea, when you talk about the Mosaic law. Here's a right, here's a wrong. Here's the revelation brought forth by the one true God. And there's only one. And here's what he wants. Here's what he believes. Here's what he said. And that's final. Right? That's that. All right. So,
yeah, I mean, what you're saying is interesting. I heard this one guy, I forgot his name, Wes, was it Wes Huff? He might have been on Joe Rogan or PBD podcast. And he basically said that Jesus at this time, during the time where people were following the Mosaic law, would laugh at the Pharisees and just the Romans who sort of thought that, I want to say the Romans, who thought that this law was basically the thing that would cleanse man. And Jesus said, no, the law is just something that reveals how dirty you are, but you can only get your salvation through Jesus Christ. So I think that's what I care about most in terms of this movie, and I felt like just the Christian doctrination or biblical principles or just Christ being the divine. I thought that sort of took a back seat because again, what I'm taught to believe and what I do believe wholeheartedly is that we can only seek salvation through Jesus Christ, but this film doesn't necessarily portray it that way. So even if, like you said, there's this dichotomy between living in a society to where you do have rules and bureaucracies and systems and so on and so forth. And you kind of need that sort of order to keep society in check. Right. But then like the postmodernist and even with like the Marxist would believe is that, rules aren't necessarily good and it's subjective. Right, and that just leads to total chaos and anarchy too. Right. But I think that the thing that's missing or that thread is just understanding that, you have to believe in something transcendental. You have to believe in something more important than you, because if you don't, then you're going to basically...
That's you.
That's me. That's not everybody else. Yeah.
But see, that's not what Marx believed, and people who, people of his ilk, right? That's not what they believe, no. Right? Because the whole problem is the problem of categorization in the first place, right? When you said, you have anarchy, right? Well, who's to say exactly what that is? Or perhaps we have such notions as anarchy because the ruling class, and this is what they'll say, right? Because everything is conspiratorial in the mind of a leftist. You have this idea that you need the status quo, right? And these attitudes and these institutions that perpetuate and promulgate these types of or just that props up these understandings, and you think this way and you have this understanding because of course you've been duped and tricked by the system, and you have sacrificed your power, surrendered yourself on the altar of this thing, of course, that is meant to make you comfortable. All the while, those who are in the know, if you will, right? This is the occult coming into play when you start talking about this type of stuff. Again, they are the ones who know. They are the ones who truly understand what is at play, and that is that the God you seek is really you. And the fact that you say that salvation comes through Christ is just a way to get you to buy into the idea and the notion that life is just drudgery. And it is that promise of life, of the eternal, when it's all said and done, that gives you hope, right? But they don't see it that way. The hope is the trick. The hope is really what keeps you complacent, because you can be living a life better than your wildest dreams if you just gave up on that, because you only believe that because a certain class of folk to whom it benefits most wants you to believe that. Because the true nature of man is not anarchy and chaos. That's the illusion. They play up that, and this is why it kills me when I even hear conservatives start saying this stuff about, well, the power that be just want to divide us, and the power that be when these so-called enlightened conservatives, these so-called woke conservatives, as they like to call them, those on the woke right. I say it all the time. I say, no, the division does not intimate chaos. Division is choice.
It's choice, yeah.
Right? Freedom, right?
Yeah.
Why do you have freedom? Well, freedom is so that you can experience the joy of true love, right? So you know what it means to actually be sacrificial, and what does it mean to perform a moral act. You don't know the difference between the two if you're constantly under the lash, whether literally or metaphorically speaking, or supernaturally speaking, then you don't know.
Yeah.
And how can you be a willful soldier if you're placed under coercion, 24/7? It just doesn't work that way, right? And so what division does, it gives you choice. In other words, it gives you freedom. The elites don't need to divide anybody. We're divided anyway. Now, you can say they exploit it to a large degree, and to that extent, I do agree. But division will be with us until the end of time. That's just the way we are, right?
That's true. Well, until the end of time, but you still need these truths, these objective truths, if you will, that people sort of agree on largely in order for there to be any semblance of order and normalcy in a society.
Yeah. Because there has to be standards. Right?
There has to be standards.
There's good and evil.
Yeah. But again, if I believe that those standards come from man, right, then why would I follow them, right? So that's why I think the whole religion thing or something transcendental is so important, because it basically says to me that I'm following something that's not of this world. Because who are you to tell me that your rules are better for me, than my own rules that I come up with?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, essentially, the idea is. Like, for example, being an atheist, and we don't have time to get into Karl Marx's entire biography, but considering the fact that Karl Marx believed that there was no way to know what, in fact, was God's will, his way, what he really wanted, right? Because we can only interpret as we see it from a kind of limited perspective, right, as human beings, considering the fact that we're limited in our faculties. And so the only thing, what we must do, so to speak, in order to kind of bring God's plan to fulfillment in a Hegelian sense, is through the process of negation, which means that I can't tell you, and this is why Marxism, these ideas, they never end well, because no one knows what's at the other end. Marx doesn't know what's at the other end. He just promises you that it's something better than what we have now, so long as we as human beings are willing to do whatever it is that we need to do in order to get rid of the things we don't like.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's at the end. I don't know.
We know it doesn't end well because of Venezuela, Soviet Russia, all of that. And it oftentimes requires one to embolden some type of centralized entity with more power, which ends up leading to them becoming like a tyrannical force that tells you how much you can accomplish and how much you can own and how much you can eat and all of this stuff. That's what it often leads to. Because if you got a bunch of entities, a bunch of people who want to be equal, then in order for them to be equal, there needs to be somebody above
can force them to be that
enforcing you to be that way, which is the actual opposite of freedom.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
But you don't have to, but of course, you won't have to force this kind of, you don't have to force this upon people, because no one would be selfish enough to do so when they have everything that they want. Right. And it's the system of capitalism or the vampire that makes it to where, people prey upon their fellow man because they lack something. And it is capitalism and the free market system, which is a system of exploitation. Let this woman tell it.
Let her tell
it. Gives them not just a sense of lack, but lack in the truest sense of the word, because they don't have all the things that they want. They don't have the things that they need, because the wealthy, they take, in her words, they take and they don't give back.
Yeah.
Really now.
But it's kind of interesting, right? Because the alternative of it, I work with this young lady who's from Peru, and she was telling me about what happened in Venezuela with certain leadership took over and implemented these socialist policies that pretty much brought starvation and famine to the society, to the point to where when all of these people were dying, the government at that time was basically putting a different cause of death on a toe tag so that it wouldn't basically connect back to them being responsible for the starvation that was occurring, which was leading to all of these deaths. So again, these socialist policies only end in poverty. They only end in a two-class system where you have few people that's rich making all the decisions and a whole bunch of poor, because you've disincentivized people from wanting to innovate, from wanting to create. And all of these things actually have a trickle down effect to society. And I think they kind of help to create a healthy middle class.
Well, that's the thing. That was Marx's criticism, right? Is the criticism, one of the key criticisms that Marx had of capitalism, or this term that he came up with called capitalism, is the profit incentive, the profit motive. Now, considering the fact that the capitalist is motivated by profit, right? He overinflates the value of his commodities, right, in order to pay back his creditors. So in other words, he exploits your labor by putting a price upon the things that you produce, right, that outpaces the actual value of your labor, so he can take that extra value off the top for himself in order to pay back his creditors. So in other words, and what you do with the thing that you produce is that you exchange, or in other words, you are given legal tender for the thing that you produce, as opposed to using the thing that you create with your own hands for your own use. The whole idea of currency in and of itself was a huge problem for Marx, and later on for Vladimir Lenin, because Vladimir Lenin, not only did he want or envision a day when private property would be abolished, but he wanted to abolish currency as well.
Well, hold on. Ryan Coogler, I think in this interview or another one, he basically says that it all went to hell when our art was commoditized.
Right. Because
somebody always going to get F.
Right.
That's what he said.
Right. Because you become, and this is one of the key themes in Marxist philosophy, is the theme of alienation. Because as a laborer, you become alienated from the thing that it is you actually produce. And this is why human beings don't realize the power that they have within themselves, because of the dialectical relationship between creator and creature. When you create something and you become isolated from that thing, you lose knowledge of self, because that thing is an instrument for your own education, which eventually becomes an instrument, or that thing eventually becomes an instrument of your own liberation, which what I mean is it liberates you from the sense of limitation, because you don't know that you are a creator as a man, i.e. you are God.
Godly. Ooh.
Unless
this is crazy.
Unless you have use of the thing that you create, the thing that you produce. So when man in our own, this was us. When you talk about God, this is us, right? Because the only way, it's like if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, doesn't make a sound. Does God exist without us? If nobody acknowledges God, is God real? Is God conscious of himself? God may be conscious as himself, just as a being. But God doesn't know of himself until he contracts upon himself. In other words, God has to create man in order so that God may know it's God.
Yeah.
And so what does that make us if we, in fact, listen to what I'm saying. I pick up what I'm putting down. We are the educator. We are the ones that give God life. We give it character.
God doesn't exist without us.
God doesn't exist without us. This is what they believe. We give it character. This is quintessential Marxism, but I'm explaining it in more occult terms, not some of the economic stuff you get on the surface. Because again, Marx understood the occult. He knew. And I don't have time to go into the whole history. And again, this starts with Friedrich Hegel. Goodness gracious. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, right? Three first names, G.W.F. Hegel, right? This was his whole idea, and without getting too deep into Hegel, was this idea that man or God is infinite, again, as one. So when you go back to the twins, the one and the two, or in this case, the male and the female, it's like the omnipotent God creates man, and from man comes woman, man, woman, sexual attraction, that's law. Mm-hmm. So once God falls from grace, then that's when law, instinct, nature, this is what nature looks like. Nature is God's law. Man, woman, we come together, we create new life. So the one creates two, and the two creates one. That's the Star of David. Triangle, triangle. Goes down, it goes up. As above, so below. Again, Hegel, who heavily influenced Marx, he was a theosophist.
Yeah.
This is all metaphysics.
Yeah.
This is all esoteric stuff.
Yeah.
It's not the Christianity. This is not Christian orthodoxy. This is all metaphysics. This is all Gnosticism we're talking about, right? And so when man says that I worship a God, God watches over me, God sees over me, that's an example of man being alienated from himself, because God is nothing more than the personification of his own higher ideals. So when you say there is no God, then you can reclaim that power, because you realize that that thing you call God was really just an object of your own creation.
It's a dangerous precedent or way of thinking. I remember talking to you and Chad about this when he was here and we were filming for a project you guys did. But, and I had mentioned Friedrich Nietzsche basically predicting that the Holocaust would occur exactly 100 years before it took place. And he said the reason would be people's lack of adherence to biblical principle, or losing their loss of faith in God, so to speak. Because once you do that, you make room for a human to emerge as a God and basically tell you what's best for you, which pretty much led to the Holocaust, right? And there's many other atrocities that have happened in the world as a result of us rejecting God, because again, you make room for man to come in and tell you how things should be done and what to do.
Right. And why does Ryan Coogler not, when he's he's talking about he's from Oakland and how he talks about how he says that this is really a part of my neighborhood, my upbringing, this is how we, but he never just comes out and says on camera to the interviewer, like, say, yeah, I'm from. He doesn't explain to the audience.
At the very end, he mentions Black Panther, and Karl Marx. He mentioned them together at the very end.
Okay. Right.
In relation to Oakland. Let's go. Because we're going to try to get through this in the next, I would say 10 minutes. So we're going to watch it in 4-minute chunks. And then I want to save the last part for a bigger, a broader conversation.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, can we talk about how Hoodoo plays in this film as well? Because I think it's really interesting how that's what saves them. That's what saves them.
Yeah.
This thing.
I mean, we can talk about all of it. No, you just really astute.
Am I getting it all right? Do I win?
I mean,
it's good me saying it, but I need you to say it.
Well, I said it with the movie, I can't like.
I know David Lynch. The films are talking.
No, but I can't double down. Like some of the stuff you asked me about, I can't like. Yeah, you asking me about like Karl Marx and like.
No, I guess
the thing is like I'm from. Yeah, no, you believe what you see. Like you know, like it's all there for sure.
Was there any reason why you made him, like, again, having the Hoodoo and the Christianity that's playing here, the black church, right? And this idea with, you know, so much of the greatest, like, blues artists who came out of the black church, right?
Yes.
But then that's sacred, but what they ended up producing is quite profane.
Yes.
I'd love to, if you could talk to me a little about that.
Oh, but also sacred.
Yeah, but well, who decides? What's the moral framework? Who decides what's profane and not? So I think it's interesting.
The people decide, I think.
So she's talking about, you know, these blues players who come from the church while they're in the church. The music that they're playing is more sacred, right? But then once they go off into the world, it becomes more secular or profane. And then, you know, he says, no, it's still sacred. The blues is still sacred. He's doubling down on that. Mm-hmm. And she says, yeah, but with morality, who gets to decide? And he said, the people get to decide. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. And that's why he's getting so uncomfortable in this interview, because I don't think he's comfortable talking about this or talking about how it's connected to Marxism. And the thing is that most people watching it, they would never know. They don't have the foggiest idea of who Karl Marx is, let alone the damage, the detriment that his ideologies, his theories have caused to society. They have no idea. Yeah. Right. But the fact that he's basically saying that the people get to decide. Me and you had a conversation years ago, and I know you don't remember this, because we done talked about a lot of stuff, but you told me that Marxism is more this belief that people are good. It's just society. It's the system that corrupts man, right? Now, you know, Christianity or the Bible says that man is inherently evil and we seek our salvation through God, from God through Jesus Christ. So there's a difference there. And him saying that it's man who decides morality versus the transcendental versus God versus what's not of this world. That's crazy. I never heard. That's why I say he's revealing a lot in here. And he basically said it's all on the screen. I can't double down on it because you saying it, but it's all on the screen.
Yeah. In the end, you know, when you know, Sammy, the soul survivor, you know, and then and I already knew, because, you know, I watched these interviews and I listened to some people talk about this film, and I knew when his father said drop the guitar, I knew that when you know, when it was at the end and then it went back to the day earlier, you could tell that he had survived something catastrophic when he comes back to his father's church. So the prodigal son returns, and he goes through this experience, and his father's trying to, like, son, let the guitar go, son. And he holds on to it, and then that's when you get the flashback to see what led up to this moment. And you know, it goes all the way back to the beginning of the film at the end, and he's still holding it. And then it cuts to a scene, and he's driving off, and he got that guitar, the handle, because it broke.
He chose that guitar.
He chose the guitar. Yep. He kept it, you know, because it's the blues, remember, and this is stuff, not stuff, you hear this stuff in African spirituality as well, again, because there's this kind of spiritual connection. And there's the cultural, it's all types of cultural things happening, political things happening, because you're talking about colonialism, imperialism, talking about when you embrace the culture of your oppressors, you kind of lose this connection to your ancestors and all stuff, because, again, it's the blues. It's the music that connects you to the ancestors, right? This is what they say in the film, right? And so, you know, Christianity kind of, I guess, cuts you off from that.
Because you had to be detached from your culture and your religion and, you know, your music, and you know, and you had to be detached from it, and basically they forced this upon you so that they could conquer you pretty much. And
then you hear him saying, you know, the blues, you know, it is sacred, and that before I'm gonna let that lie for a second, because I think that's a part of a deeper conversation that I want to have, if we can squeeze it in just briefly.
Okay,
just about how secular art can serve the sacred when done properly, and why Christians, and more broadly people who are either socially, politically conservative, why they don't make good art, and what they don't understand about art, and why the left dominates art and culture. That's something I want to speak to.
We're going to do the last 30 minutes. We're going to dedicate that whole thing to that, because that's a huge conversation.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? The people decide, like the whole dichotomy of that. It was all about money. It was the devil's music, because when it was time for offering, the congregation didn't have as much money because they spent it on drinks the night before. You You understand?
Yeah.
The same people were going to the juke joint before they came to the church.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't the devil's music because they were swiveling their hips.
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Well,
Like,
because people still, when people are in the church, they still have these like feelings.
totally.
It's just context.
It's the same
context.
people, yeah. So it's it's the same people doing both things, and I think what made like, I don't in blues there's no mind, body, and metaphysical separation. In the church concept, there often is. The flesh is the enemy. You understand?
Yeah.
Now, just as a quick point, he's wrong when he says that. He talked about the flesh being a separation. No, it's not. Because your body, that's you, right? That's who you are. What he's describing a type of Christian thought called dualism. And I think dualism has officially been declared a heresy, if I'm not mistaken. All right, this idea, and this is the gnostic concept, and this is what you get from a lot of Eastern religions. This idea that the flesh, not just the flesh is in the body, but it's the physical world itself, the world that you can see, right? It's like it's like a cloak. It's like it's an illusion, essentially, because wherever, and this plays heavily into the transgender ideology, right? This notion of a kind of sexless being, or he's someone who can flip-flop as being a higher type or a higher form of being, because polarity, right, when you're talking about opposites, right, that's the illusion. Anything that's opposites, because when the pendulum swings, right, in order for there to be a physical world, right, there must be vibration, signals, frequencies, and these kinds of things, right? And so ultimately, God is stillness, doesn't move. But once something moves, then it vibrates, right? And of course, the slower it vibrates, the denser the frequency. That's matter, right? Matter, mata, mother, right? Essentially is where we get the word mother, mater or mata. It's matter, right? Matter, the physical world or the earthly plane. That's the mother earth. The earth and the sun is essentially masculine, because the father is abstract. That's when you watch you see the old images of the Madonna and the child. It's like mother and child. Where's the father? Oftentimes you'll see the son behind the mother. He's there, he's present, but he's abstract, right? The mother is more hands-on, because the mother is kind of like, feel, right? I want to feel the sensation, right? You make a woman fall in love with you, right? If you can make her, make her feel good, and things of this nature. Well, again, then this is all, again, this is all like occult, esoteric, right? Type stuff. But this is where it comes from. This is where they get it from. So if you're talking man, woman, that's an example of a polarity, right? That's an illusion. And so the goal is to escape. Now, you would have to ask someone who's into this kind of Eastern mysticism, this kind of Gnosticism, because that's what Gnosticism is. It's kind of like these Eastern influences into the West, kind of like information, stuff like that coming in from the Orient. And the idea is to separate from matter, separate from the mother, the flesh, the body, because the spirit self, of course, is the true self. Because the world, the evil world that God created, because he created an evil world, God must be evil himself. It's another aspect of it. Some believe on that side, right? But how do you overcome? How do you see past the illusion? Because everything is fake. But see what Ryan Coogler is saying, that no, blues embraces this, and embraces this idea that the flesh, and that the world, the body, is there's something to that too. But Christianity says the same thing. He is talking about a heresy that does not define Christianity, not the way in which, most biblical scholars and theologians, that's not what the majority of them think and believe. That is, in fact, a heresy. This idea that, my body is an illusion, but my spirit is who I really am. No, your body is who you are, because if your body is not who you are, and what you do in the world and the actions that you partake in is in this world, is of no value, because it's all an illusion, then how, in fact, can your actions have any moral content or consequence? They don't. You know what I mean?
So what is wrong, right?
So
what is evil? Yeah.
So the body, because God wants you, He wants you to enjoy being a human being.
Right.
Look at sex, for example. Again, sex is a major theme in the film, right? God wants you to have great sex, enjoy sex, but He tells you how He wants you to do it. You got to do something with your body. Do what I want you to do, and it's gonna serve you well in the long run. Never mind, because there aren't simply consequences in the hereafter for bad behavior, or you'll be judged. But you're going to suffer here too if you don't do what I say. Not because I got some mad and I'm going to make things happen. And say, maybe God is, kind of omniscient in this way, or omnipresent in this way, and kind of making things happen. But when you make poor decisions, when you don't allow His word to be your guiding light, then, you aren't protected from the things of this world, right? The pitfalls. And so you have to do that. So I just wanted to stop it there and correct Ryan Coogler, because he's wrong.
Yeah.
Christianity doesn't tell you it tells you have to conquer your passion, conquer the things of the flesh, so that you know how better to conduct yourself in a world of temptation
where it don't lead to like a Shannon Sharp situation.
Exactly. Yeah. So it doesn't take you, so that it doesn't separate you from the Father. Augustine says something, because again, St. Augustine was challenging all of these Gnostic notions that Ryan Coogler just put forth. This idea that the world is the source of sin, matter. Matter is the source of sin. He said, no, it's not matter that is the source of sin. He said, because God made matter. So matter, by definition, cannot be evil. It's not matter. It's in here.
Yeah, and then later, I guess right after this point in the interview, he basically says that, so if you want to holler at that girl, blah, 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 then do it. If you want to do this, basically saying, don't resist those urges, those fleshly urges to do what it is that you innately want to do, right? Yeah. So he mentions that. I don't even think we got to talk about this interview anymore. I think it's pretty, I'm going to be honest, I think it's pretty clear. And what I wanted to point out, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Like the married woman in the film.
Yeah.
It's like, well, she started off by saying she was married. I'm saying, why does a married woman conducts herself? So she mentioned the fact that she was married one time, and she told him, boy, watch yourself. But she never spoke about her husband. She never said anything else about it again. So she's sitting up at this juke joint all times of the night. Where's her husband? Yeah. She surely hell isn't conducting herself like a married woman, sitting up here singing and sweating and gyrating on the stage. Where is her husband? I guess, of course, she's a sinner, I guess. So evil came for her. But again, if she felt some kind of attraction to Sammy, then, heck, why not? After all, he asked her, you're married, but are you happily married?
Yeah, so why not live in a moment, right?
And what the heck marriage got to do with happiness?
Right.
It's like, well, you think because if you get married, you will become happy? No, you have an obligation to be happy, and doing the right thing is fulfillment in and of itself, and you're happy because of that. Yeah. So this is how you stay in your marriage. You don't want to put that burden on your wife, because she can't do that for you.
Yeah,
right?
she can't. Yep.
Because
it's your responsibility.
It's your responsibility.
You don't get married to be happy. You get married because it's a duty and your responsibility. But you mentioned some things that ring, very true. I think that I think that the responsibility part, I think what you're saying is that people can enjoy life, they can enjoy sex, but if it doesn't happen within a biblical framework, if you will,
I told you to do it.
Yeah, then it's going to lead to your destruction. And we've seen it happen time and time again. Not only your destruction, but it'll lead to the detriment of folks even around you, right? And to society at large, if everybody acts in that way.
Because you feel it. Let me tell you something. Speaking of Karl Marx, interesting. I'm trying to remember the name of his housemaid. Was it Ellen DeMuth? I don't know. I could be thinking of someone totally different. I forget her name in the moment. But of course, Karl Marx, famously had an affair with the family maid. Karl Marx, his wife, right? She took the revolutionary path as well, but his wife was fairly wealthy. It came from a fairly wealthy family. Because I'm trying to remember the details in terms of how they were able to, why did they have this maid? Because everyone knows that the Marx family, they were notoriously poor, just barely struggling to get by. I mean, it was miserable. In many respects, Karl Marx's wife, Jenny, I mean, she was almost a model wife because he sent because of his Marx and the ways he had about him. He wasn't going to go up and get a job. He told her from the outset, if you marry me, you will be marrying a revolutionary. That's a quote. And she chose him, and she stayed with him until she died, to her credit. And so they had this maid, and Karl Marx famously had an affair with her, and they made a child, an illegitimate child. And Friedrich Engels, the only friend that Marx ever had, it's funny, Engels even threatened at one time to disassociate himself and to disavow Marx, because Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, he was married for a time, even though he was a serial philanderer his entire life. But he was pretty heartbroken when his wife died, and he reached out to Marx to get some, for his friend to console him. And Marx said something. I said, bro, don't worry about it, man. Count your blessings. One time, I think he even wrote to Engels one time and just saying that blessed is the man who has no family, because it was a burden for Marx, and he couldn't stand it. But even though it's in a weird way, you get the sense that when you read the life of Karl Marx, you get the sense that he did genuinely love his children. It's kind of weird. But, or at least I kind of feel that way to some extent. Now, maybe, he wasn't able, of course, to overcome his own selfishness, because after all, again, his wife died before he did, and he didn't even attend his own wife's funeral. But I get the sense that he somewhat loved his children, even somewhat loved his wife. And here's the moral of the story. Is that he had an illegitimate child with the family's maid, and he, and going back to the story, Engels told Marx, "Hey, bro, that's my wife you talking about. Hey, take that shit back. Oh, I'm not. We're done. I will never speak to you again. Apologize." And Marx, he said, "All right, man, my bad, bro. I'm sorry." So he apologized, but he asked Engels. He said, "Bro, I messed up, bro. I done got this other little side chick, man. I knocked her up, but I got her pregnant." He said, "Man, do me a favor, man." Bro, he said, "Bro, you gotta say this your baby. Say this your child." And so Engels said, "All right, man." So he claimed the child. And it wasn't until I think Engels on his proverbial deathbed admitted that it wasn't my child, I was Karl's. I think he ended up confessing to one of Karl Marx's daughters, and the story goes that she was so torn up by it, Karl Marx's daughter, that her father would do that this was one of the causes of her suicide. Because I remember like two of Karl Marx's daughters committed suicide. And I say all of that to say, when you think about it, this is Karl Marx. This was, one of the most militant atheists of the last 200-300 years. No one hated God more than Karl Marx.
Yeah.
But he cheated on his wife and got another woman pregnant. And for some strange reason, he knew it was wrong. So much so to the point where he wanted to hide it from his wife by asking his friend to take the fall. Mm-hmm. Why would he do that? Did he just know? It's kind of written on his heart, right? The Bible says, he didn't want to, maybe he didn't want to have financial responsibility for another child. I don't know. But for whatever reason, he knew it was wrong. Because again, even if you didn't want to take financial responsibility for another child, hell, you don't believe in God. I mean, what's guiding you? What is your, just say, well, I don't want to take care of that baby. F that baby. Maybe he felt an obligation that I have to do something for this child is mine. Right? But in order to evade responsibility, he wanted to blame it on the other guy. That's always deep to me. It's like, well, how committed to his atheism was he really? Because he knew right from wrong. But you're so committed because when you curse God, now here's what we're going to round out the being. Because if you don't, it goes back to what we're saying. And this is why Christians make bad art, or those who are just so ideologically committed. Now, I said this on a past podcast that conservative Christians are too ideological because they'll see something, whether it's a horror movie or any kind of movie, and they'll say, as a Christian, how could you watch that? As a Christian, how could you look at that?
That's why they losing.
They're cursing.
Yeah.
There's sex. There's this and there's that. I'm just like, have you ever read the Bible? You because see, you can only reach this old cliche. You have to reach a person where they are. Let me tell you a little story, bro. This is not my story. This is Andrew Klavan's story. All right, I mentioned Dennis Prager earlier. I mentioned Andrew Klavan now. And another Jew, right? So, they call me a Zionist online. So I guess, I'll embrace it, right? Idiots. Anyway, so Andrew Klavan, he tells this. I heard him tell this story. There's a YouTube channel that's committed. There's there's a lot of Jews come on there. I think it's called I forgot the name of the YouTube channel. God's Chosen Ministry. I think that's what it's called. And Andrew Klavan tells his personal testimony on one of their videos, and I sat there and watched it, and it's very moving. And I'm gonna try to repeat it. It was only like a 14-minute video. I'm gonna try to give you the bullet points. So he said in the videos, again, ethnic Jew, and of course, Andrew Klavan is a Christian, right? And that's what the YouTube channel is about. It's about Jews who believe that Christ is the Messiah, Jesus. He says that as a Jew, he just, for whatever reason, he was culturally connected to his Judaism. He knew what it meant to be a Jew, but he just didn't feel that kind of connection with God. He didn't know if he believed. Essentially, he didn't believe. He didn't believe in God. But he said, he faked it. He said his father once told him, he said, boy, he said, no one has ever flunked out of being Jewish, but you pretty damn close. Because he went to Hebrew school all his life, whatever. He was a terrible student. He couldn't have cared less about the Torah or the teachings of the Mosaic. He couldn't have cared less. So he lives his life all the way up to his bar mitzvah. He said he just goes through the motions, whatever he had to memorize in Hebrew. He said he barely even knew Hebrew. He said he made up words. All right, it's over. Boom. You've been bar mitzvah, and it's over. And traditionally, the people, family, friends, they come and they heap a bunch of gifts upon you. He said he got all type of bonds and money and jewelry. He said he had thousands of dollars worth of jewelry. He said in the following days, he felt horrible. He said, I felt horrible. He said, because here I am, this person, I got all this thing, I got all this money, and I went ahead and recited a bunch of shit I didn't even believe in. He said, so one morning, the guilt got to him so much, he went, when all the family was asleep, he took all the money and all the Jews and buried it in the bottom of the garbage can. He said he pushed it down to the bottom of the can, and he waited until the day when he knew the garbage man was coming the next day. So took it. He said, I'm done with that. But he always had this idea he wanted to be a writer. And he came to the realization, similar to what Jordan Peterson likes to say. He said, the Bible is so true, it's like beyond true. Because the Bible is the source of all literature. It's the source of all things true in the West. Klavan had this idea then, right? Even as an ethnic Jew who didn't believe in God, he said to himself that Jesus is the foundation of all Western literature. So if I want to be a good writer, I got to learn about Jesus. So he said he goes and he starts reading the gospel according to Luke. He didn't have a good relationship with his dad. His dad just liked to pick with him. That's how he describes his relationship with his father. He said his father just liked to be an a-hole. So he said his dad knew he was in his room doing something. So his dad just kicked the door in without knocking and saw that he was reading the New Testament. He said his father went haywire, went off. He said, if you ever convert, I will disown you. He said, bro, I wasn't reading it because I just was trying to learn about Jesus because I want to be a better writer, right? So he goes on living his life, boom, 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 trying to make it as a writer and novels and Hollywood and all that stuff. He ends up getting married. He's going through the motions. He said he's just having a miserable go at it. He's just sad, depressed. He can't figure it out. Like, what's going on? You know? And then one day, he said that he had just got a novel published, didn't do well, couldn't sell it. So he's sitting there with this novel. No one wants it. He said he was at the height of depression. He was going to kill himself, right? He said he had a wife, a child at the time. He in his early 20s, late 20s. He's like, man, you know what? People would probably be better off if I'm gone. He said he lived in an apartment building. They said he lived on like the 10th story. He was going to jump out the window. He said that as he was contemplating suicide, he said there was a Met game on television, the baseball game. There's an old Met player. He's in the Hall of Fame now. Former great catcher, Gary Carter. Right, he's playing for the New York Mets at the time, so this had to be sometime during the late 80s. And he said Gary Carter was a uber religious guy, and Gary Carter was Andrew Klavan's favorite player. And every time Gary Carter got interviewed about a game, he would always say, all praises to glory to God. Thank you, Jesus. He said, I love Gary Carter as a baseball player, but every time he said something about God, it made me furious. That's how most atheists are. He said, I was incensed. I said, bro, why can't you just say you worked hard? I prepared. I did this. I did that. I watched great tape or whatever the hell baseball players do to prepare. Why you got to talk about this God stuff, man? I mean, that's what Gary Carter always said. He said that he was contemplating suicide. He was sitting there. A Met game was on. Gary Carter ended the game by driving in the winning run by beating out a ground single to first base. And Gary Carter was a catcher, so he had bad knees. He spent a lot of time squatting down, so he had bad knees. And he beat the throw to first base. The commentator asked him after the game, Gary Carter, how did you, with your knees, how did you make it to first base? He didn't say nothing about God. God brought me through. He said, you know what? Sometimes you just got to play through the pain. Andrew Klavan said, wait a minute. He said, I'm tough. I don't know if I believe in God, but I can do that. He said he always talked about God, but he said he knew, this is what he believes, that God gave Gary Carter a message to give to him.
Wow.
But God was so humble in that moment that he didn't make it about himself. He reached Andrew Klavan by not talking about himself. Sometimes you got to play through the pain. He said he never thought about committing suicide again. Never.
Hold on. Okay. Bridget, how many minutes we got left on that one? Man, listen. Oh, my God. Okay. So go ahead.
Yeah. And so I say all of that to say, Andrew Klavan said he was so depressed because he fancied himself an intellectual.
Yeah.
And this is what intellectuals do. This is why he justified his state of just being miserable all the time, because this is the burden of being an intellectual, because they see the truth.
Yeah.
They see things for how they really are. And as intellectuals, this is the cross we must bear, figuratively speaking.
Yeah.
Right? But he said, but why he was so miserable is because he didn't have God, which meant that he was cut off from life. You can't be an artist and accurately reflect life if you're cut off from the source of life. God is the source of life. Right? And he said that, damn, If I'm tough, I can play through the pain because that's what God gives you. This is why Christians are bad at art, because it's not that once you embrace God, your life is going to be good. Your life is still going to suck. Jesus came
pain and suffering.
Jesus came and went.
But you're going to pick up your cross.
Because what it does is it gives you hope. Now, Marx will say that's bad because hope makes you complacent because it doesn't make you a revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
But Christianity says, no. God made you a promise. Christ dealt with pain and suffering. You just have to bear it for the time being, and I promise you I got something even more glorious waiting for you.
Well, not only bear it, but maintain your ethical orientation.
Your ethical orientation if you want to stay close to me.
Just like Job.
Right, just like Job, because when it's all said and done, what God wants us to do is play through the pain.
Listen. Yeah, that's so good. That's the reason why you saying that conservatives or even Bible believers or adherents are bad at at art.
Because because we're human beings, we're terrible. But you can tell a story. You have to tell them about God without telling them. But it's not about hiding it. Because you can't approach it like an ideologue, because what you're doing is you're trying to impress the people who agree with you, and you're trying to convert the people who don't agree with you.
Right.
But in doing that, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to convert them or you're going to piss them off.
Right.
This is what the left does with their art, and this is what the left has become, because the left can make good art. As a matter of fact, the people in Hollywood are the best people at what they do.
Yep.
I don't care about their politics. You ain't gotta like them. Mm-hmm. But see, here's the thing. This is why the left pisses people off on the right. It's not the fact that the left has. People say, well, we don't want politics in our film. It's like no, because if you're talking about something transcendent about man and the human condition, politics is going to flow downstream from that at some point. Can you tell the truth about something without it being political? That's the question, because it's not the fact that the left put politics in their art. It's the fact that they lie in their art.
Yeah.
And that's the part that gets us.
Yeah.
It's the lies.
Yeah.
It's not the agenda, because if your agenda is lying, that's what I have a problem with.
Yeah.
It's that leftism is a lie.
Yeah.
And therein lies the problem, right?
Yeah.
And that's why, because that's what conservatives don't understand, and that's what even leftists don't understand when they make this stuff. You can tell the story about God, but if you're telling the story about God and you want to educate people and bring them into God, you got to tell it to them where they are.
Instead of trying to, it's almost a way to assert your moral superiority if you're so. That's right. If you're so direct about it.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. The people don't
make it about you. Mm-hmm. Don't make it about the fact that you have this allegiance to Jesus Christ, and therefore you're or the assumption is that you're holier than thou. Make it about meet me where I'm at and tell the story like it is, and I'll find God through that, just like Andrew Clavin.
Yep, I'll find God in the story.
And he said that's how he found him.
That's how he found him.
I'm gonna let you get the last word. I want to say this one part because I know we got a couple of more minutes. So this whole movie review thing that we did, movie review, because I didn't really talk about my thoughts on the movie, but it's irrelevant at this point. I think that the main thing was to basically tell people how important, or remind people how important propaganda is, and how it's swayed the minds and influenced the masses and has shaped culture and how we see things. And it's extremely important in that sense. So, when you're watching something, you want to basically know what it is you're watching, because even if you're not conscious of what you're watching, it doesn't mean you won't be influenced by it. It doesn't mean that it won't desensitize you to certain things or shape how you view things or how you move in the world, right? And that's the reason why I wanted to do this review, not to try to tell people what to think, but to tell them what this stuff is really about, not to demonize Ryan Coogler or Michael B. Jordan, but to tell them what this film is really about, so that you can make up your mind for yourself. Yeah. And with that said, I'm gonna let Chuck get the last word on this.
Yeah. And like you say, the whole thing, like, man, with the blues, and this is why I said I wanted to kind of give Ryan Coogler some credit here, because what he's saying is we don't anything from blues. If you're a gifted sculptor, painter, if you can sing, whatever it is that you can do, that's God.
Yeah.
That's God.
Yeah.
All glory. That's when Jesus came. He said, bro, don't worry. That's why people kill me. You know, these Christian purists, these Christian ideologues. Everything is pagan. Everything is this and everything is that. Don't celebrate Christmas. Don't do this. Don't do that. It's all pagan. A lot of it.
She even said in this video that paganism is the thing that actually saves people. That was one of the things.
See, no. It's not the paganism.
That's what she said.
About the paganism that saves. That's not the point. Again, when it comes to Christ, when it comes to Jesus, it's like, yes, understand that, yes, you have a culture, but now you have to reverse course or change course and direct all your focus toward me. Because all things, I am worthy of all praise. So all things you must do is in the name of me. Understand that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not, so you're going to have, again, you know, the blues, again, sex, rap, hip, all of that stuff. I mean, and that's the point I'm saying what I'm saying, because a lot of people, sinners, or don't watch it because it's anti-Christian, anti-that, or you shouldn't watch horror movies, action movies, movies with sex scenes in them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not telling people what to watch or what not to watch. You discern, you decide for yourself. Some things you may not say, I want that in my soul. I don't want to, but fine. That's on you. Right. But there's a difference between something just being outwardly hostile to you and something that may in fact be sort of calling out to you in a way that is not so direct. But the messaging is still there, because this is still a broken person trying to communicate a story to somebody else that's broken. Right? So the quest is, how do you bring that and translate that into this higher truth, the higher light, the only light, the light. You don't do it by shoving the Bible in their face and making Christian. That's why all the Christian rap sucks. I don't give a damn what nobody say. Yeah, you got some Christian rappers out there that are talented, but ain't nobody gonna buy that. Ain't nobody gonna listen to that. And I know people say, you know, the way is narrow and this and that and whatever. Praise music, gospel music, 95% of it sucks.
Yeah.
And that's why, right? Because people know BS when they hear it. Because they know that when it's all said and done, my life is still going to suck, right? But how do I figure out how do I keep a smile on my face in the midst of all of that?
Yeah.
Because life is still going to life.
How do I bear my cross?
How do I bear my cross in the midst of all of this? And how can I find God in all of this mess?
All this chaos. Yep.
All right, that's what a good artist can do. So when Ryan Coogler talks about the book, he's right. That's right. You know, when you listen to a voice like Whitney, that's God, and that's God coming through Whitney. Got to be. Or anybody does something for Michael Jordan. That's God.
Yeah.
You see? So it's, you know, it's different. So this book here, this is my last thing. This book right here, this is an atheist's wet dream. Almost every atheist probably has this in their collection. It's called Drunk with Blood. The subtitle is God's Killings in the Bible. Right? Talks about all the times God killed someone. Let me just read a couple of the reviews. This is from Steven Pinker. All right. And I happen to like some of Steven Pinker's opinions, but here's what he says about this book. An eye-opening look at the rapes, genocides, and murders that are recounted with relish and approval in the so-called good book, and a nice reminder of how modern secular morality based on human rights and human flourishing is much further advanced than the traditional morality of religion. This is one more. This is someone else. This is Hemet Mata. I don't know who there is, but they're an editor for thefriendlyatheist.com. They say, if you ask Christians to describe the God they believe in, they'll tell you that he's kind, merciful, and perfect. In this book, Stephen Wells, that's the author, reveals the God of the Bible for what he really is, a bloodthirsty killer. In this meticulously documented book, we are taken through a series of slaughters that will make you rethink everything you learned in Sunday school. If you still worship God by the end of it, you brave some explaining to do. So here you have these atheists saying, now wait a minute, God, religion, your holy book, your good God. Oh my God, look what's in it. The introduction of the book. Now that's my last point. The introduction. For this is the author. Bible believers, on the other hand, are less proud of God's killings. Oh, they like a few of them: Noah's floods, Sodom and Gomorrah, Jericho, those that can be made with considerable dishonesty, he claims, into cute children's stories, but the rest are either completely ignored or completely unknown to believers. I believe that most believers would stop believing in the Bible if they knew what was in it. We say, no, there's a point. There's a moral to the story. Do you understand it? Do you know what's in it? Like, really, like what, not what the Bible says, but what it's trying to tell you. Film is the same way, right? If you can say, F the culture, I don't care, because what they're doing, what they're promoting, what they're putting out. You say, I don't want nothing to do with that. The atheist can look at your Bible and say the same thing. Oh my God, Lot's daughters got him drunk just so they can have sex with him?
Wow, this is an incredible point. Wow.
What? Why would I read that tripe? Wow. Your God is not good. Your God is not holy. Your God is dirty, evil, nasty, wicked. Ugh. And I can go on and on. Read this book, Drunk with Blood. And then go on and look at someone like Ryan Coogler and say, oh man, screw him. He hates my faith. He this, he that. Or Hollywood in general. People once upon a time said, well, Hollywood used to make good Christian films. What happened? Well, maybe that's part 2 of the discussion. That's a whole nother discussion. But Hollywood used to make Christian films, some more overt, some a little bit more covert. Right? An industry that was created by Jews because they loved Christianity and they loved Western culture and they wanted to celebrate it.
I get the point you're making, man, and what you just said about, you know, the Bible being full of these stories. When you talk about Lot and, you know, him getting drunk and having sex with his daughters and this, that, and the third, like it's a bunch of stuff in that Bible. So it's almost contradictory or hypocritical for us to criticize people for including real life things in their art, even when the underlying message is in total alignment with God and the truth.
Right.
Wow.
It may or may not be.
It may or may not be.
But you got to listen.
Yeah.
You got to pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I want people to try to think about even with this movie. You know, does it align with God or I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. But I think you guys have enough in this conversation to make your own decision. Yeah.
And I think that the film is like I told you when we were walking out the theater. I think that it was blatant exploitative propaganda. I believe it was. I mean, there are moments in the film that just completely shatter the fourth wall. You know, where it's just outright, you know, preaching. It makes the point right on the nose, a little bit too on the nose. But you know, even I mean, it goes back to Marx. Even this is why Marx. That's why his idea, his philosophy is still appealing to this day, right? Because there was some truth in it. There's some truth there.
Yeah.
A lot of it, when you think about it, Marx considers stuff to be reaction. Marx was reacting to the changes around him. Because see, as a Jew, now you got to think about something. I know we said we're gone. But again, life apart from God, life away from God is misery, is rage. Marx hated his Judaism because his Judaism was the source of contempt from the people who disliked him. Living in Central Europe, you can only imagine what it was like growing up being Jewish in the Prussian Empire. And he hated his Judaism, right? So you want to make a better way. You want to make a better world. These people, you know, they hate me for being Jew. They hate me for who I am. Like I said, it's not that you have to prescribe to his solutions. Again, that's my point. Because in many respects, Marx had all these things going on around him, right? But it reminds me, it's an old quote by, I think he was a philosopher. I heard this quote from the late, great Sir Roger Scruton in his book, How to Be a Conservative. He quotes a man by the name of Robert Conquest. And Robert Conquest once said that that everyone is conservative when it pertains to things that they know. So in many respects, when we look at Karl Marx, we say, man, he don't represent conservatism as we understand conservatism today. But Karl Marx was reacting to an ever-changing world coming into being that he didn't fully understand. Not yet. Now, he predicted a lot of things would happen that didn't happen in many respects. For the most part, it didn't, not the way in which he envisioned it. But Karl Marx was a conservative reactionary for his day because he was reacting to economic changes that brought about demographic and geographical changes that was very concerning to him, because in many respects it was disturbing to his way of life, right? And you couple that with his hatred, I think, if I were to psychoanalyze Karl Marx from a distance, very, very long, far away distance, I would think that he had contempt for his Judaism because it was a source of great shame. And I think that may have led him into a hate for God, even though he did convert to Christianity for a time and was quite devout. But there is a truth in Marxism. This is what conservatives don't quite understand. Is that you can't just, it's wrong. But what is it about Karl Marx's teachings that are so alluring to people? There's a truth in there. And so there's a lot of truth in a lot of things. And this is what Christians, don't seem to understand. And they better wake up to that fact that they're going to keep losing. They're going to keep losing. Because Marx understood something that a lot of folks don't give him enough credit for. And in many respects, he was a conservative for his day. He was a conservative of his time, and it's a hard pill to swallow for some people.
Man, I get it. So all you Christian artists and, filmmakers and, rappers and all of that stuff, I think, this is a call to action.
Bro, the great, I don't care. I'm not into gospel music. I don't like these Christian artists. The greatest, most moving, you can say whatever you want to say about this person. May he rest in peace. That's DMX.
DMX, that's what I was thinking about.
You say whatever you want to say about him. I don't know where he is, I don't have a hell or heaven to put him into.
He had people praying at his concerts.
But I'm going to tell you something. People say, man, he talked about murdering and killing and did all this. People want to talk about the songs he made called Damien. But it wasn't a celebratory tale. It was cautionary.
It was cautionary, yeah.
That's what happens when you sell your soul to the devil. But on DMX's second album, I don't care how many Mahalia Jackson, I don't care how many gospel songs you want to bring up, the most moving pro-God Christian message song I ever heard in my life. And I'm only 41 years old, so it ain't been a long time, and I don't know a ton of gospel songs. But the most moving pro-Christian song I ever heard in my life was DMX's Ready to Meet Him. The most pro-Christian song I've ever heard in my life. It spoke to me, and it gave me a good, solid message, understanding of God. I'm ready to meet him because where I'm living ain't right. Black hate white, white hate black. It's right back to the same fight. They got us preparing for war, but the real war is to follow the law of the Lord. I'm ready to meet him.
So, Chuck, where can people find you, man? Your social media, your YouTube. Look into this camera and just tell them. Teach him Chuck. On YouTube, Dave will probably put the link to my YouTube channel on my Instagram page in the chat. I just have 2 social media platforms. I'm on YouTube and I'm on Instagram. I don't post a lot of content on YouTube because, I have a life, a regular life, and it's hard for me to stay consistent on YouTube given how much research and time I put into my videos. I do long form discussions on very complex and complicated topics. And so if you have a long attention span and you're into that kind of stuff, go to my YouTube channel and check it out. And me and my good friend Chad Jackson, it's his film. I contributed to it. Dave contributed to it as well. Vince Everett Ellison is also part of the documentary, and it will be coming out soon. I don't know if Chad has picked the title yet, but it's coming out probably within the next few weeks. I don't know when. If you're listening to this, when you're hearing this message, it may already be out by then, but be on the lookout for this documentary, Motives Unmasked. Again, I don't know if that's going to be the title, but we unmask, hence, Motives Unmasked. So we unpack a lot of
things in history involving the civil rights movement. We talk about the McCarthy era, the church. We even go all the way back to, the 1860s. We talk about the Civil War and just the whole. I mean, we talk about a lot, and I know it sounds like disparate. How the heck y'all put that in one film? How do those things even relate to each other? You'd be surprised. So it's gonna be a dope little documentary, man, for real.
All right, y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in. Again, be sure to look at the description of this YouTube video, because we're going to include the link that we watched, which is this interview that this young lady is doing where she's talking to Ryan Coogler about the film. I'm also going to include the episode that Charles is in on Conversations with TinBridge. It's my second episode. It's called The Battle of Ideas. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nah, bro, I was just thinking. I was telling you about that song. You know what I'm saying? Even in it, back then, Max said, bro, you abandoned me. He said, God said, my child, I'm here like I've always been. It was you who went away and now back again. You know what I mean? He said, what did I say? And what did you do? He said, well, what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? And then he says, I told you, bro, in the song. He's speaking for God. He says, I told you that no matter how hard it rain, withstand the pain. I told you. I didn't turn your back on you. You turned your back on me. I told you what to do. And then DMX again, and then in the song, it's about him coming full circle and coming back to God. That truth, the most basic truth, is what you realize when it's all said and done. It's the most basic truth.
Man. All right, there y'all have it, man. Thank you. I appreciate you, Chuck, for this, man. Conversations with TinBridge. Peace.